So this mom says that her daughter had a friend named Sophia and that she would talk about her all the time. What they did at recess, the fight that they had, how they got happy again. So there was a day where they were having a parent-teacher meeting, so she took advantage of that and asked the teacher about her daughter's friend Sophia. Her intention was to get Sophia's parents' information so that they can plan like a play date outside of school. Teacher ends up looking through the classroom's name and then she looked through the entire grade and she said that there was no girl named Sophia. She thought that maybe her daughter was confused and maybe Sophia was like her friend from another school. She thought maybe she understood wrong, but she explains how the details were very consistent. So when she ends up going home, she tells her daughter, hey, you should invite Sophia over to the house so that you can play with her. But her daughter's like, no, she can't come over. Her mom won't let her go anywhere. So she ends up asking the daughter for Sophia's mom's phone number, but she says that she doesn't have their phone number. So she ends up asking her, what class is Sophia in? Is she in your school? And she said that her daughter completely changed the conversation. Now, she didn't want to pressure her because she was like kind of scared of what she was going to find out about Sophia or things like that. But she made it a point to pay attention to her daughter and what she does without her daughter finding out. And that is where she discovers certain things. She would see that her daughter would actually save food from home for Sophia. She explains how fruit would disappear, food, even bread from the pantry. At first, she did think that her daughter was eating it, but there was one day where she saw her daughter walking out of the house and she had a bag full of food in her hand. She sees when her daughter leaves this bag of food on a fence and just walks away. That's when she started to go through her schoolwork or like notebooks, and she said that there were drawings of her daughter with another girl, and the girl on the drawing was named Sophia. She noticed that her daughter would draw Sophia like really skinny, skinnier than her, and she had the same clothes in every single one of those drawings. Almost like Sophia would use the same clothes every day. There was one night where she could hear her daughter talking really low in her bedroom, so she thought she was talking on the phone. When she peeked into her daughter's room, she noticed that her daughter didn't have a phone in her hand, but that she noticed that she was talking to somebody outside of the window, and that somebody from the other side of the window was responding to her. So the following morning, she decided to follow her daughter as she walked to school just to see what she was up to. She ends up following her for 2 blocks, and that is when she sees her daughter go to this empty lot that had this like tiny abandoned house in it, and she ends up seeing a girl coming out of that little house. The little girl was skinny and she had the same clothes that was drawn in the drawings at home. That little girl was really dirty, and she's like, this has to be Sophia. Obviously, when she sees that there's a little girl coming out and her daughter walking towards that little house, she too walked towards them, and she says that Sophia got really scared and kind of retreated back. Her daughter got in between her and Sophia and was screaming at her mom to please leave Sophia alone. Don't tell anybody that she's there, because then they were going to separate her. She spoke to both of the girls really calmly, and they got, they felt a little bit safer, and they decided to tell the mom the story. So she finds out that Sophia is real. This is not a paranormal story, but I thought it was going to go there too. She explains that this little girl had been living in that house by herself for a long time. She was so saddened because she says that she had passed that house so many times without even thinking that there was a little girl in there. Sophia was 12 years old, and she has been staying in this abandoned lot for about 4 months because her mom abandoned her there. Apparently, the mom had told Sophia that she was going to come back when she found a house to live in, but the mom had not returned. The way that her daughter met Sophia was that she was walking to school, and Sophia ends up coming up to her asking if she had anything to eat, because at that point she was really hungry. And Sophia asked her daughter not to tell anybody that she was there, so obviously the daughter was trying to keep that secret. Ever since that day where she met her, her daughter had been taking her food, keeping that secret, and taking care of Sophia however she could. She did end up having to call the authorities because she didn't want to leave Sophia there. She took her to her house, and she is living somewhere that is feeding her. She's going to school, and she is okay now. She explains that her daughter does go visit her where she's at right now, and that the foster parents are really good. They're really nice, and they do take very good care of her. I know that this is not scary or paranormal, but I just thought it was a good story. I feel like it almost gave imaginary friend, but yeah, no, Sophia was real.
The person that sent me the story called it demons? ? By the way, if you have a story that you'd like to share with our community about glitches in the Matrix, dreams, aliens, cryptids, or the paranormal, you can send it to this email address. And remember, we believe you. Hi, my name is Inga, and I have experienced many frightening paranormal things throughout my life. I swear the house I grew up in caused my mother and brother to go crazy. And Anyway, to start off, I feel like the house I grew up in was just a portal for demonic entities, or my older brother messed around and let them in or something. But there was always something around, something happening, things disappearing for months and then returning to their place like nothing ever happened to them. I have seen many entities, and all members of my family had also seen some type of entity at least once and had a story about it. When my parents split up, I left the house and I got an apartment with my father. I was about 17 years old. I feel as if something followed me out of the house and was still around in this new apartment. I think I have finally gotten rid of it from following me everywhere I lived now 20 years later. I remember one morning, I was waking up in bed, my feet were towards the window, and I could see the sun shining through the blinds. When I went to get up, all of a sudden, the eeriest feeling came. It got dead silent. Even though it was probably only about 8 or 9 in the morning, and I could typically hear activity outside or bangs or other noises from neighboring apartments. And then I realized I couldn't move. I wasn't able to get out of bed or even stretch. Fear overcame me, not because I couldn't move, but just the eerie feeling that was there. I was extremely terrified. Then the room started filling with swirls of black, smoky-like figures, and I could hear random voices and whispers, although I could not understand what any of them were saying. The fear in me just kept growing and growing. My chest was so heavy. I didn't know what was happening. It went on for so long. I finally decided, okay, whatever this is, it's not a good entity at all. Well, yeah. I felt like it was ultimately there to take my soul or my life or both. I decided there was no point in being scared anymore. Whatever was going to happen was going to happen. I accepted the fact I was about to die and there was nothing I could do about it. So I stopped being scared and prepared to die. Oh my God, this is intense. Slowly, the room started clearing of these swirly, smoky things. The voices started fading away. There was dead silence again. And then almost like a slowed down record playing, the normal sound of the world started coming back. The sound of normal sped up faster and faster until it wasn't slow motion anymore and just normal. And I was able to sit up in my bed. I just sat there thinking, what in the world really just happened? I felt like I just visited hell. I haven't been able to explain this. Talking to a friend about it, we've decided that maybe I accidentally astroplaned, but I'm not sure. Anyway, if you want to hear any more paranormal experiences, let me know. I have a few. This one, though, was my most terrifying experience ever in my life. The end. Yeah, that sounds pretty terrifying. So when we're waking up and falling asleep, we are the closest to the astral, right? We're the closest to like the veil, if you want to say it like that. And this is because when we're falling asleep or waking up, your conscious mind is letting go of like physical sensory input, and it's allowing you to access higher energetic frequencies and the astral plane. So it makes sense that this was happening like as you were waking up. If you were seeing multiple things swirling around your room, like that was definitely multiple. I'm assuming that was multiple beings. Like that's what I would think, not just one being or one entity. I don't know what they were exactly, but they did not sound good. I think it's very interesting that when you like accepted your like fate that you were not going to make it, that is when they went away and they faded away and everything went back to normal. I wonder if it had anything to do with the fact that you like accepted and just let go, or if there was something in the room protecting you. I lean more towards there was something protecting you that made them go away. Anyway, that is definitely terrifying. Let me know what you guys think in the comments, and thank you so much for sharing your story.
I lived in a haunted house. All right, story time. So back in 2018, when I first moved to Colorado, I found myself in a situation where I was looking for a room. And at the time, I didn't have the best credit, so I was having trouble getting an apartment, I'll be honest. Well, I ended up renting a basement down in Colorado Springs from a girl who I'd never met before, and, well, she took me in and gave me a room to rent. It was a pretty sweet deal. I had the whole basement to myself, and it was a cool house. The only problem was, well, the house was haunted. So let me just paint the picture a little better. I moved to Colorado, and I ended up needing a room to rent, so I rent this basement down in Colorado Springs. I've never been to Colorado Springs before when this happens. I don't know anyone in Colorado Springs. My job is about 40 minutes away north of Colorado Springs, so like I have to leave the city every day and commute for a long time on I-25, which sucks if you know Colorado at all. That road's not the best. Anyways, so I'm living down there in the Springs, and it's new to me, so I don't know anyone, and it's a big city. I'm by myself. And then I'm in a house that, well, let's just say They were very nice to me, but it was like a new environment and I didn't know anybody, so I was definitely the fish out of water and the stranger. And in this house, everyone knew each other, and there was a lot of people that were in and out of the house all day, so it was kind of like a party scene. And I was comfortable there, don't get me wrong, I'm very grateful for it. I had a roof over my head, I had a place to sleep at night. At the time, my 2 cats, they had a place to stay and they were safe in the basement. So for that first winter in Colorado, I had a dope little spot down there in that basement to stay safe. But the haunted house part comes in now, and it's just a little creepy. So the first weekend I'm down there, my roommate goes to Las Vegas, just leaves me in the house. And looking back, 1, that was super cool, but 2, I was a complete fucking stranger, and she just left me in the house by myself for the entire weekend. But that's just what kind of person she was. She took me in, she was very trusting. Anyways, so I'm staying there, and I'm down in the basement. It's my first weekend there. I worked all day, like a 9 to 5. I came home. I'm chilling in my basement. She's in Vegas, and I'm laying there on my bed, and I start hearing weird shit in the house. So I text her, and I was like, hey, is there anybody up there right now? And she literally texted me back and said, hey, quit being a pussy. There's no one in the house. It's just the way the house is. It's an old house. It makes noise. It creaks. It was a windy night. I don't know. It just felt creepy, though. Like, I locked my fucking door, and I did not leave my room the entire night. The vibe just felt strange, and I felt like there was something up there. Anyways, I ended up living there about 10 months, and the entire time I lived there, every time I walk in, I just feel kind of like something staring at me, and I just kind of rush to my room. I rush through the living room. I rush through the kitchen, and I constantly feel like there's just something back here somewhere, like, staring at me the entire time. Well, it seems like there was. So, long story short, I moved out of this house, and I got a place with my wife. At the time, we were boyfriend and girlfriend, and we got our first apartment together. So I moved out of the basement, we got our first apartment. Time passes on, but then my ex-roommate starts posting these videos of paranormal shit in the house. Because I wasn't the only one experiencing this feeling. So in conclusion, what happened? She ended up putting cameras all around the house, outside the house, and caught all kinds of creepy-ass footage. There was little orbs that came around and then like floated into things. There was all kinds of apparitions. Just creepy shit that I would definitely chalk up as paranormal. And it didn't look staged or faked in any kind of way. It looked creepy fucking paranormal shit. And after I've been there and experienced it and felt weird energies there, it made complete sense that there was fucking little orbs floating around the doors. There was things floating through the house, staring at you, following you. She felt it too. There was like faces in her mirrors that she had pictures of. All kinds of creepy shit happened after I moved out that she documented that I wish I had to show you, but this is a true fucking story. Colorado Springs has a history of being haunted land because that area goes back to Native American, like people centuries ago. So I don't know what to say. That's kind of a ramble there, but that's my story. In 2018, I lived in a haunted house, and after I moved out, the girls started posting paranormal videos of the house. It was super creepy. The entire time I lived there, I had like weird vibes, and I never felt completely comfortable. And my wife said the same thing. Every time she stayed there, she said the vibes just felt off, and it felt super creepy. It was an older house. I don't know what happened before I lived there, but I don't know. Maybe I should look into the history of it one day because I still think about it sometimes. Have you ever had a paranormal experience if you've made it this far? And let me know what you think of my story. I appreciate you listening, and I hope you have a great day. Peace.
I saw this video last night.
Must have been out of her head.
And Logan Canyon here in Utah instantly came to mind. So Logan Canyon on its own at night is really creepy to me for some reason. But 8 miles deep into the Logan Canyon sits an abandoned property known as St. Anne's Nunnery, or St. Anne's Retreat. It was built in 1915, and originally it was a summer camp for the rich. Then it was donated to the Catholic Church, where it was turned into a spiritual retreat for nuns. It was eventually shut down and abandoned, and now it sits on 2.5 acres of Forest Service land. But the rumors about this place are incredibly creepy. Rumors about nuns who accidentally got pregnant and then drowned their babies in the camp's swimming pool so no one would hear them cry. The swimming pool is now empty, by the way, but locals say you can still hear babies cry deep in the woods here. There are other rumors about big dogs with glowing red eyes, murders that took place on the campsite, and eventually a real documented crime took place here, also in the swimming pool. Locals say this is one of the most haunted places in Utah, and whether that's true or not, not, I know one thing is for sure. The road leading up to this abandoned camp at night is genuinely terrifying, and it's a road that I've only driven once. This isn't my typical content, as what I'm about to tell you is mainly just urban legends and folklore with no real proof to back it up, but it is terrifying. And if you want to lose sleep tonight, stick around, lock your doors, and let's talk about it. So like I mentioned, this is St. Anne's Retreat, and it's an abandoned summer camp. It wasn't always named that though. And to really understand why this place is so creepy, we need to go all the way back and learn the history. So this property was originally owned by a man named Hezekiah Hatch, but I've seen many articles refer to him as Boyd, so that's what I'm going to call him. Boyd was a prominent businessman in Logan, and he had ownership in multiple companies like Hilton, RKO Motion Pictures, and Paramount. He built the very first cabin for his wife in 1915 as she really liked camping and being outside. And from that, they expanded to about 21 buildings. This includes 2 main lodges, 6 smaller cabins, a playhouse, a massive swimming pool, and some other cool buildings. At one point in time, there was even a theater and a horse stable, but those were eventually demolished. Boyd put in a lot of work to make this grand summer camp, and it eventually turned into a summer retreat called Hatch Camp for his other friends and family. During their operation, they hosted a lot of movie stars, government leaders, and millionaires. Like, this was a summer camp for only the most prominent and wealthy. Once Boyd and his wife died, this was passed down to their children, who continued the summer retreat. Eventually, in the 1950s, Hatch Camp was donated to the Roman Catholic Church, and it was then turned into a spiritual retreat and youth camp. They changed the name to St. Anne's Retreat, and a lot of people know it as St. Anne's Nunnery. Now, it didn't take long after the church took over this camp for really creepy rumors to start spreading. Again, I want to make it really clear that what I'm about to say is just based on folklore and urban legends, but nonetheless, it's still really creepy. So legend says that nuns were sent to the St. Anne's Retreat after accidentally getting pregnant by either monks or priests. How true that is, I don't know. But rumors started spreading that these nuns would then hide out here at the retreat for their entire pregnancy to hide it. And then they would drown their babies in the swimming pool before anyone could hear them cry. There's one story in particular that keeps coming up when you research this case, and it's about a young nun who, again, drowned her baby in the camp's swimming pool and then ended her own life on the property. Ever since then, it's been reported that if you go up to this property or even just near it at night, you can hear babies crying deep in the woods. And some say that sometimes you can see an apparition of a woman dressed in black roaming the property. This isn't the only urban legend said to haunt this place. Apparently, along with the nun rumors, St. Anne's Retreat was known to be the spot for satanic worship and hellhounds. A hellhound is a terrifying supernatural dog said to serve the devil or guard the gates of the underworld. Stories about these creatures appear in legends all over the world, but they're almost always described the same way. Massive, jet black, unnaturally strong, and with glowing red eyes that seem to stare straight through you. Unlike wild animals, hellhounds are said to be intelligent and deliberate. They don't hunt by accident. They choose their targets. Many legends claim that seeing one is a warning of death, and hearing its footsteps or distant growl means something dark is already following you. Some stories even describe them surrounded by smoke, fire, or the smell of sulfur, as if they've just stepped out of hell itself. What's interesting is that locals claim to have experienced all of this on or near the abandoned property. Some say they saw Dobermans with glowing red eyes. Others say they never saw anything, but they heard what sounded like a big dog growling and smelled sulfur. The Catholic Church eventually couldn't keep up with the care that this retreat needed, and with all of the local rumors and creepy urban legends going around, it was a known hotspot for people trying to break in. On several occasions, people would break into the property trying to investigate the rumors themselves while the nuns were there alone, which scared them. Eventually, they couldn't take it anymore and closed the camp, and in 1987, the camp was sold once again. It then became a youth summer camp for the Boys Club of Weber and the Salt Lake Center City Community Center. For a long time, this operated under seemingly good conditions with no complaints of anything scary happening. But the camp was sold once again to a private buyer in 1993. Then it officially became abandoned. Even though it sat untouched, disturbing rumors were still spreading about this place. Like from people who snuck onto the property and saw what they claimed was the massive swimming pool, which had sat empty for years at this point, now filled with blood. Then the camp made national headlines in 1997 for a very real and very creepy creepy reason. So it was pretty well known that teenagers would sneak onto the property late at night to go ghost hunting. And on October 10th, 1997, a group of 8 teenagers did exactly that. They waited till the sun went down and broke into the property. But shortly after, they were caught by 3 security guards armed with shotguns. Instead of just calling the cops like normal, these security guards took it to the next level. They herded the 8 teens into the abandoned lodge, handcuffed them, and tied their necks together with ropes. The guards called the police themselves and released the teens when officers showed up. That should have been the end of it. But later that night, a group of 30 more teenagers snuck onto the property. They had no idea what had just happened earlier that night, and I'm sure if they did, they would have just stayed home. Once on the property, the 30 teens were caught by the same 3 armed guards, who then forced them all into the empty swimming pool. They tied their necks together, zip-tied their hands, and then they told the kids that if they moved even an inch, an explosive would detonate and they would all be instantly killed. For 2 hours, these guards physically abused the boys and sexually assaulted the girls. But again, they called the cops themselves. What's really weird is that the local police labeled the guards as heroes, even though they had just committed horrible acts against these kids. The community, though, did not let this slide. This sparked major outrage, and eventually the 3 guards were arrested. They were then charged with 6 counts of aggravated assault. What's really crazy is the teens were all facing trespassing charges. But since this property technically sits on U.S. Forest Service land, they legally were not trespassing. So for the past 50 years, there have been many ghost stories and urban legends about this place. But the only evidence that a crime actually happened was this incident in 1997. Historians have dug super deep into the history of this property, and no murders from nuns have ever been recorded. Not to say that it didn't happen, because this place is really weird. It's just that none were ever officially reported. St. Anne's Retreat is now owned by a private owner and is private property, but he says he has plans to restore it as a future mountain resort. Sadly, the trespassing has not stopped, and people continue trying to break in. It's happened so much that the new owners have security guards 24/7 monitoring the land, and they have security cameras all over the place. There's also a Facebook page dedicated to blasting the faces of these trespassers. So just FYI, don't try and break in. It's mean and not cool, and you will get in trouble. I got a lot of my information from the Utah State University digital exhibit on this place. It's honestly super cool, so if you want more detailed information, go look there. Locals still say that the most haunted place on this land is by far the Hatch Children's old playhouse. I guess a lot of people have experienced some disturbing things there. Also, shout out to Zach Baggins. He featured the St. Anne's Retreat on an episode of Ghost Adventures, which is one of my all-time favorite shows. Anyways, when I saw this video, it immediately made me think of Logan Canyon and this creepy abandoned retreat. What's a place that's really creepy to you once the sun goes down? I want to hear your stories like this.
What would you do if you started getting very disturbing voicemails from 10 minutes in the future? This is Scared with Jess, and today's story is about a woman who says that she was getting voicemails that were trying to warn her until they weren't. This happened to me last year when I was still working late shifts downtown. I usually got off around 10, but every now and then I'd get stuck finishing reports and not leave until closer to 11:30. On those nights, I walked 3 blocks to the parking garage by myself. I drove home and tried not to think too much about how empty the city felt once everything good was closed. And the first voicemail came while I was walking to my car. I felt my phone buzz in my coat pocket and figured it was spam, but when I got into my car and checked it, I saw I had 1 new voicemail from my own number. That made me stop for a second, and I clicked it. At first, it was just breathing, and then the sound of footsteps, and then traffic noise in the background. It sounded like someone walking outside at night with their phone in their hand. And then I heard myself whisper, "Don't look behind you when you stop." The voicemail ended. I just sat there staring at my phone. I checked the timestamp and it was marked 11:48. The time on my dashboard was 11:38. I actually laughed once just out of nerves because I thought that there had to be some stupid explanation. Delayed system glitch or a weird carrier bug or old voicemail coming through wrong, something. And then I heard tires crunch slowly over the parking garage level behind me. I had just been about to look in the rearview mirror, but instead, I froze. I don't know what made me listen to the message, but I did. I kept my eyes forward and waited until the sound passed. And nothing happened after that. There wasn't a knock on my window. There was no one walking past my car, just the noise fading out somewhere behind me. I drove home and told myself it was just a coincidence. And then the second voicemail came the next night. The same thing, from my own number, timestamp 9 minutes ahead. And this time I listened to it as soon as it appeared. At first it was just the sound of my blinker ticking and my engine idling. And then my own voice said very quietly, "Don't take the elevator." I looked up at the parking garage entrance in front of me. I always parked on level 4. I always took the elevator down because the stairwell smelled like old pee and something worse. I checked the garage clock, and the time on the voicemail was 11:56, and mine was 11:47. I sat there for maybe 15 seconds arguing with myself, and then I parked, got out, and took the stairs. Halfway down, I heard the elevator doors open on the floor below me, and then a woman scream, just once, sharp and terrified, and then instantly cut off. I stopped so hard I nearly slipped, and then I ran the rest of the way down and onto the street without looking back. I called security from my car, and they said they'd check it, and I never heard what they found, and after that I stopped pretending the voicemails were some harmless glitch, because twice now they had told me something before it happened, and twice they had been right. And the third voicemail was worse. I was already home when it came in. I had just showered and made tea, and I was curled up on the couch with the TV on low. My phone buzzed on the coffee table. A voicemail from me, time-stamped 12:14. The microwave clock in my kitchen said 12:04. I played it, and for a few seconds it was just the sound of my apartment. The television, the heater kicking on, a spoon tapping lightly against a mug. And then I heard myself say, "Don't answer the knock." My whole body went cold, because as the message kept playing, I heard 3 soft knocks in the background. My future self inhaled sharply, and then the voicemail cut off. Exactly 10 minutes later, there were 3 soft knocks at my apartment door. No pounding, and just patient. I stood there in the living room with my phone in one hand and didn't move. The knocks came again, and then a woman's voice from the hallway said, "Can you help me?" I stayed quiet, and after a few seconds she laughed softly, and through the door she said, "You listen this time." I did not sleep that night. By then I should have thrown my phone away, I know that. But by that point the voicemails felt less like haunting and more like my only warning system. They were the only reason I had avoided whatever kept landing 10 minutes ahead of me. So I kept listening. Over the next week they got more personal, and some were small. "Don't open the bathroom door yet," or "Stay in your car until the man in the red hat leaves." "Do not take off your headphones at the crosswalk." And every time I listened, something happened exactly the way the message implied it would. Not always something huge, but wrong enough that I knew something was walking slightly ahead of me in life, seeing things before I did. And then one night I got a voicemail that changed everything. It came in while I was brushing my teeth, timestamped 10 minutes ahead like always. I hit play, and at first I heard myself breathing hard, like I was running. And then my own voice, shaking badly, whispered, "Don't let him see you answer this." I stood there staring at myself in the bathroom mirror, and then in the message I heard another sound. Footsteps, and not mine, heavy and slow and behind me. My future self started crying. Not loud, but an awful choking sound that people kind of make when they're trying not to make noise and failing. And then I heard a man's voice, very close to the phone, say, "You listened too late." And the voicemail ended. I don't know how long I stood there. I turned off the bathroom light first, and then the hallway one, and then the TV. And I don't know why, some instinct, or maybe some feeling that being visible was suddenly worse than being alone in the dark. I grabbed my keys and left my apartment without even putting on shoes. I sat in my car in the freezing parking lot until sunrise, and no knock came that night, or a man appeared that I saw. Nothing happened. That was almost worse, because it meant the voicemail had not warned me about something outside. It had warned me about something that now knew I was listening. I don't get them anymore. They stopped 3 months after they started, with no explanation or final message, just silence. But I kept every single one. And once in a while, when I'm stupid enough to replay them, I notice new things in the background. A laugh I didn't hear the first time, a second foot of footsteps, and a voice breathing along with mine. And the worst one is still that last voicemail, because right before that man says, "You listened too late," there's 1 second where I can hear myself in the future trying to whisper something else first. I only figured it out after playing it over and over. What I'm saying is, he's here early. Anyway, good luck sleeping tonight.
Believe it or not, there's a mountain range in Brazil that is almost as terrifying, if not more terrifying and full of lore than the Appalachian Mountains. The Serra do Mar mountain range in Brazil is ancient, older than most people even recognize. This mountain range stretches miles along the coastlines of Brazil, just miles and miles of the densest forest you can even imagine. When I say dense, I mean dense, thicker than your ex-boyfriend's head, bro. The sunlight barely meets the ground. Locals even say that whoever goes on the mountain always gets something taken from them. The mountain always takes something. Maybe a backpack one day, maybe a trail disappears another day, or maybe a whole person disappears. So the story starts with one of the worst storms that Brazil had seen during the time. A rescue team had been sent into the mountains to look for missing hikers and or residents, rural residents who live out there. They were doing this because landslides had torn through that area of the mountains. So they sent out a team of firefighters, search and rescuers, volunteers. But those mountain ranges are vast and crazy. So they made sure that they had a very experienced trail guide or like a mountaineer. It's actually one of the volunteers that wrote this story for everyone to read out on Reddit. It goes on to say that the first portion of the search and rescue was normal, but they were walking through, just dealing with the weather that comes after a natural event like that. But then the guide in the front stopped. Now this is the guide that they found specifically because he was a mountaineer. If you know anything about mountaineers, they are people who, they have mapped out the mountain range, but they know it like the back of their hand, okay? Can I speak English? I don't know. He was an older man from a nearby village. He had extensive knowledge of the wilderness, and that's exactly why they brought him with them. Well, needless to say, he was not the type of person to scare very easily. He turns around and faces the group, and he looks at every single person, and he makes sure that they're all listening. He says, if you hear anybody say your name, do not respond. Or if you hear anybody talking at all, do not respond, because if it's a person, then now the person knows your location and they're probably gonna come find you. If it's not a person, now this creature or animal knows where you are, right? So he just wanted to get that out in the air. At first, everybody laughed at him. They were like, that doesn't make any sense. If you know Brazilians, you know that they're like that. I'm like, bro, we're not gonna hear anything. It's just a forest. Let's keep going. One of the volunteers was curious enough to ask him why, and he repeated what I had just said before. If there's a person out there, they're gonna know your location, they're gonna come find you, and if it's not a person, then who knows what they're gonna do, what it's gonna do. But basically, the whole team kind of just chalked it up to old man folklore and oh, he's just a mountain man, he's just an old man, he doesn't know what he's talking about, he's trying to scare the youngins, I don't know. So they kept going. As they were going, the fog kept growing thicker and thicker and thicker until visibility became about 20 feet in front of them. Once the fog had become its thickest, that's when they noticed that the animals around them had just gone completely quiet. One of the volunteers described it as feeling like the earth just taking a deep breath in and holding it. Then somebody heard their name. A woman walking near the back of the group suddenly stopped. She swore up and down that she had heard her brother's voice, but the problem with that was that her brother was thousands of miles away. Regardless of this knowledge, she calls out. The guide immediately grabbed her arm, super hard, really fucking hard. And he just flat out said, do not do that. Don't answer them. The woman laughed nervously and just kind of thought, I'm imagining things, whatever. About 30 minutes after that, into their hike, another guy started to hear his voice be called in the woods. Then another. And they were all in different voices, mind you, and it just kept going like that. It was like the voices of everyone's personalized loved ones talking directly to them. With this, the guide became visibly agitated. He ordered that everybody come back together and that they just start ignoring the voices and that this was a huge fuck no. So they kept going under the guide's rules this time, and they ended up making it by late afternoon to the site of the landslide. Entire sections of forests had been ripped away. There were like giant trees that were rooted and cracked up, completely devastated. As they were observing the conditions, that's when they saw the figure. Now at first, they were not scared because why would they be? They're out there looking for people. They're expecting to see people, and this figure looks like a person. What they see is this very thin person standing off near the ridgeline of this like devastation. One of the volunteers raised their hand up and shouted and said like, "Hey, are you okay? We're here to help." And another volunteer got up and did the same thing, to which he got no response. And then another tried, no response. The rescuers were just assuming like maybe this person is in shock, maybe they're injured, maybe that's why they're not answering. So a couple volunteers start to like go towards the figure. But the guide does not move. One of the other volunteers who is trying to follow the other ones has to walk by the guide, and he notices this and he's like, why aren't you going with us? Like, this is what we came here for, is it not? The guide was just staring at this figure in pure terror and horror, which, like I said, is weird because this man is not scared of anything. The other team members could barely understand him when the man's voice became just above a whisper when he said, "Don't go near them." Now imagine hearing that from a man who has spent his entire life in those mountains. Fuck no! So the rescuers stop, and the guide slowly lifts up his flashlight, letting the beam land on the figure. And what they saw in that flashlight beam made everybody freeze. The figure that they had thought was just standing alone was actually fused to a tree. It was a part of a tree. Its back looked like it was literally fused to the tree trunk. Its arms were so long that it nearly hung down past its knees. Its mouth was so open and agape that it literally looked like its jaw was just broken and hanging on its hinges. The volunteer telling this story said that he honestly couldn't even recognize what he was looking at. His brain just kept flip-flopping between like seeing a dead person and then just seeing something completely out of this world. Then the figure moved. Didn't move a lot, but it moved just enough. Its head twitched and looked directly at the group. The volunteer who wrote this story says that the sound that this thing made was the worst part of this whole entire story. So after it snaps its head slowly and looks at everybody, it starts making this god-awful clicking sound. Like, I can't remember what video game I've ever played that has that clicking sound in it, but I've played one that has it, and it's really terrifying. I don't know for sure, obviously, if that was what they heard, but that's what I imagine is like those like clicking sounds from like horror movies or like video games. So the clicking sound eventually turned into like this dry cracking sound. Volunteer described it as sounding almost like a bunch of trees being snapped in half inside of a hollowed out log. But that, the group started immediately walking back. They were like, yeah, we don't want any part of this actually, let's backtrack. Everybody starts backing up slowly, but one of the volunteers wants to get one last little look at the thing before he finally takes off with the rest. So he shines his flashlight back up at this thing. He said that when the flashlight hit this thing's face, the piercing stare that it gave him physically burned his insides. Like, it hurt physically to look this thing in the eyes. The volunteer screamed at the top of his lungs at the sight of this and the pain that he felt, so he dropped his flashlight and suddenly everything went dark. For about 2 seconds, that is, until somebody else picked up their flashlight and turned it on, frantically looking around because they had just been in pitch blackness for about 2 seconds. As he's scanning around with the flashlight, he can't find the figure again, which he should have been able to find. It was directly in front of them. Everybody goes into a full-blown panic because what the fuck? Make the decision to head back to their vehicles, and the guide, it was in agreement. He was like, yeah, fuck these people who were in the landslide, we need to go home. So they start hiking back, and it is a silent hike back, mind you. They are horrified, and they're trying to listen around for anything in the forest or whatever, and they do hear something. They hear like giant, big, long, elongated footsteps walking like near them on the forest edge. It didn't sound like human footsteps. Like I said, they were huge footsteps. They were uneven, also like dragging. It was always close by behind them, but never close enough for them to see. Every single time that they stopped walking, the footsteps also stopped walking, which would terrify them even further. So this thing was basically stalking them through the woods, matching their every move, and that was sending people into a full-blown panic too. But darkness was coming, which was sending people into a further panic. And then one of the volunteers heard their name again from behind them. It was a perfect imitation of this man's wife's voice. So he spun around. Of course, like we would expect, nobody is standing there, just trees, fog, grass, whatever else is there. For one split second, he thought he saw something standing between the tree trunks. It was that tall, gangly, unnaturally thin figure staring directly at him. It obviously wasn't the same one because it wasn't fused to a tree, and he described this one as being taller than the last one. Somehow, some way, the group finally reached their vehicles right, and they dispersed home and they went home. Nobody slept that night, and several of the volunteer members and guide members literally refused to talk about this moment. But according to the guide, they had actually entered the area and territory of the Corpo Seco. This literally translates to a dry body, or the dry body. But Corpo Seco is basically this thing that has been rejected from both heaven and hell, so it has no other place to go. Something that waits in lonely places for people to disappear. Something that likes to lure people deeper into the forest. According to the guide, the reason that you never answer it when it's trying to call for you is not because you don't want it to hear you. You don't want it to know that you heard it, because once it realizes you've heard it, that's when it's allowed to follow you home. The most disturbing part about that is that the volunteer who wrote this story actually went home and a few weeks later woke up in the middle of the night to hearing like whispering by the side of his bed. Mind you, he lived hundreds away from Serra do Mar. When he opened his eyes, he could smell the same smell that he smelled out there, which was that deep mud smell of the Serra do Mar. He just knew right then and there that he had not come home from those forests alone.
Inside the Las Vegas dam tunnels for years, and I have reason to believe that there is something that is neither human nor animal living inside the walls. This submission to Spooky Scary Storytime came from John, and John says that this is the type of story that if he heard, he would roll his eyes at. 2012 to 2019, he was working as a civil engineering technician and inspector in southern Nevada. He says most of his job was routine and boring. It involved flood control infrastructure around Las Vegas. So he worked on things related to stormwater tunnels and drainage pipes and culverts, and occasionally they got contracted on bigger jobs tied to the Colorado River system, which included the drainage systems tied to a major dam, which he doesn't want to name because he says he still knows guys that work there. And he says, just as a disclaimer, he has heard and knows of the stories of people that are living in the tunnels underneath Las Vegas. Everyone who lives there knows about this. It's documented. It's a real thing. He says there are flood channels underneath the strip where hundreds of people, maybe more, live permanently. Some never even come to the surface. He says he's even seen some of those makeshift camps himself during routine inspections. So people have makeshift beds down there. They have dragged shopping carts down through grates. And he says certain parts of those underground tunnels have violent stretches where you don't want to go. He knows that some people have been last reported seen before going missing, going into those tunnels. He said all of that is real, but he never bought into the wild tales about like rituals that people held down there or witchcraft covens using abandoned service tunnels. He never believed that there was some secret government infrastructure down there or there was any type of creature in these tunnels, because he said that all of that to him just sounded like urban legends that every city has if they have underground infrastructure. That's why he says what he encountered down there was unsettling, because this wasn't a homeless camp. It wasn't a guy squatting. This was something that knew the restricted and locked sections of these underground tunnels better than he and his team did, and it had been there seemingly a long time. Whatever it is collecting metal. So he says the drainage galleries of this particular dam is not like a wide open space like people probably imagine. Instead, it's narrow tunnels that have like pipes running along the ceiling and the walls, and tunnels are narrow with maintenance corridors and ladders and valves, and there's a few equipment rooms that are just like damp concrete. And some sections are well lit and modern. Others look frozen from like the 1960s with water dripping and nothing fancy. Most of the time when doing a routine inspection, he would walk miles and miles of seepage drainage galleries, and he was looking for water or dripping or anything out of place, really. The first time he comes across what he calls the collection piles, he didn't really think much of it. But tucked behind some pipes in an alcove were metal objects. So it was a bent spoon, it was a couple metal rings, old coins, heavy bolts, and a pocket watch with a cracked face. He really thought when he came across this small pile of metal objects that another coworker was just sort of collecting metal debris that he found down there. Maybe stashing it in one place to throw it all away later. And so when he got back to his post, or when he got back with his coworkers, he mentioned it casually and everybody else just sort of shrugged. A about a month later, he was walking down that same stretch and he noticed that that same pile, because he recognized the pocket watch with the cracked face, had moved to a different corner about 100 feet down the corridor. It happened again and again, and he found the same pile in different places. And every time he found it, the pile seemed to grow a little bit bigger. That same pocket watch was always in there, but there would be like small padlocks or a screwdriver. And then other inspectors that he worked with reported finding similar collections in other low traffic areas of the tunnels. It was always metal. It was never paper. It was never plastic. It was never food wrappers or anything nasty. And it became such a frequent finding down there that they actually started joking that they had a tunnel goblin, but nobody really cared to move it. Nobody really admitted to doing it, and nobody cared to investigate. So it just kind of became this background noise, and they all just sort of thought that somebody else on their crew was doing it. That all changed the day that John says he found footprints. In a dusty section near a drainage channel, the floor turned to mud, and he noticed a trail of tiny footprints. They had 5 toes, a distinct heel, and were perfectly human in shape, but only about 4 inches in length. The tracks continued for about 20 feet before stopping directly in front of an 8-inch drainage pipe in the wall. He says nothing bigger than a large rat should have been able to fit inside, and so he shined his flashlight in. There was nothing. He calls his supervisor. His supervisor comes down, takes a glance at him, and says, "Those are raccoon tracks." But John says he has seen raccoon tracks his entire life, and this was nothing like that. This wasn't even close, but months later he was working alone, and he said he's used to the silence down there. You can hear water dripping from 100 feet away, but he turned a corner and he froze. He found the largest collection of metal yet. He found dozens of coins, several watches, a pocket knife, keys, and what appeared to be scrap metal that were all arranged in a perfect circle. And then he started to hear some scraping behind a bank of large pipes, like something was shifting its weight. So he called out thinking that there must be another coworker down there or something, but there was no answer. He moved closer with his flashlight raised, and he said between the wall and the pipes was a narrow 3-foot gap. And so he crouched down and he shined his flashlight into the gap, and for a fraction of a second he saw something. This thing stood about 3 feet high. He said it was pale, it was small, it had thin arms and an oversized head. He had no idea what he was looking at, and he said when he shined his flashlight in its eyes reflected the light back. And then it moved. He said in a way that was incredibly fast, and that reminded him of the way that an insect moves through a tight space. He heard some scraping and then silence. And so he shoved his shoulder and his arm through, and he tried to see behind the pipes, but all he could see was a dead end. The space ended with another small drainage pipe. But this opening was no bigger than 5 inches in diameter and too small for this creature to have fit through. So he had no idea where this thing went, and he continued searching for about 20 minutes, but turned up nothing. He said his heart was pounding, but he knew that whatever this thing was did not want to be seen by him. And so he walked back over to the circular pile of metal, and then he noticed that there was something painted on the wall. It said, "Don't leave tools." But it was faded and it was old, like it looked like it had been there forever, and he must have passed it a dozen times without even noticing it. Below the "Don't leave tools" warning was some other fragments of letters that he couldn't read. And so eventually he goes back to his post or back to his coworkers, and he's telling an older guy that he works with who has worked there since the 80s about it. And that guy told him that that has been written on the wall down there since before he even started. And so John's like, "Well, do you know anything about it? Like, why is that written on the wall down there in paint?" And the guy just shrugs at him and he's like, "I don't know. Stuff used to disappear down there." John says he left that job years ago, and he still tries to tell himself that there is a logical explanation for what he saw. But from what he remembers, and he says he can still picture it clear as day, this was not human, this was not animal, this was unlike anything he has ever seen. He has tried to tell himself that it's just his mind playing tricks on him after too many hours in the dark underground. But the older he gets and the more he thinks on it, the less he believes his own rationalizations. Because whatever this was, it moved through locked, restricted sections that require keys and permits. It navigated pipes too small for any human or animal, and whatever it was collecting shiny things, and he says he thinks it may still be down there. So what do you all think is down there? Let John know your thoughts. He will be seeing the comments, and if you have a spooky or otherwise unbelievable story that you've been too afraid to share, please send it in. We would love to hear it, and we can change your name if it makes you more comfortable.
You may not agree with me, but I truly believe that not everyone should have pets, especially if their lifestyle is not fit for it. And this dog right here is the prime example of what I'm saying. It all started when a guy decided to explore an abandoned mine, but you see, he didn't want to do it alone, so he brought his dog with him called Millie. The reason why he brought Millie is probably for extra security. You know, animal instincts are way better than human ones, so yeah, he brought his dog to be safe and be aware if something happens. So they started exploring together, and after a while, they started getting deeper in that abandoned mine, and this is where Millie started acting differently. Yes, Millie started showing fear and panic and was no longer listening to her owner like before. It got to a point where she was not listening to her owner anymore and she just went after whatever she was sensing in that mind. And you know that something is wrong when your dog starts acting differently, and that's exactly how they got separated. So the guy tried to catch Millie and calling her in the dark, obviously no response, no barking, nothing, complete silence. While he was looking around with his flashlight, he suddenly saw this. I think you know what happened here, no need to explain. So the guy was in complete disbelief because it all happened so fast, and he couldn't even carry her and bury her outside because as soon as he came close, he heard a terrifying noise that scared him and he decided to get out, leaving Millie behind. When this video was posted, a lot of people criticized the guy for not taking the dog outside, saying that he should have at least carried the poor dog outside even though it's unalived. And let me tell you, I already said this multiple times, it's easier said than done. Blaming somebody and judging them is really easy, but when it happens to you and you're in a situation like this when you have to make a choice, it's not. By leaving Millie behind, the guy survived whatever did this to her, and it's the truth. A lot of people think that Millie was attacked by a mountain lion, a cougar, a puma. Call it whatever you want to call it, it's the same thing. Millie is not surviving that. Some people are like, nah, Millie was not attacked by a cougar because if that was the case, the guy could have at least heard something, you know, like a barking sound, a struggle. He didn't hear anything. They think that whatever happened to Millie was linked to this abandoned cave, something supernatural that you can't really explain. And you know, there are some people here and there saying that the video is fake, and I hope that the video is fake. I probably said that for the first time of my life, but I can't see Millie going through this. But I don't think so, because you can see the wounds on her. This shit is serious.
Come on. This is huge. Hey! What do you see, Gogo? What do you see? Do you see something? Hey, hey, get up. Hey, hey. Hey. Where you going? Hey, hey. Where you going? Hey, get up. Hey. Millie! Millie. Millie! Oh, God. Sit.
Did you know there's an actual dorm room so haunted that it had to be sealed off? And it's been sealed off for decades because the paranormal activity was just too intense and allegedly tragic things happened in that room. And so they sealed it. And this is at an actual university. This is the legend of room 428 at Wilson Hall at Ohio University. This specific building sits in the middle of a pentagram, and the things that make the pentagram are cemeteries. So cemeteries sit in a perfect pentagram, and this building sits right in the middle. Not only that, allegedly in the 70s, this specific hall was boys, and something happened to a boy in room 428, and then years later a girl stayed in that room, and she was trying to do like astral projection and pretty much anything to contact entities, probably because she heard about what happened in that room and maybe she was trying to like draw energy from it. But anyway, she ended up self-deleting in that room. And so because of that, and then the paranormal activity that continued to happen after that in that room, they had to seal it off. Because anyone who stayed in that room after that experienced like intense paranormal activity. The hauntings are also not strictly confined to that room. It is said that that entire building is haunted. But I mean, first of all, look where it sits. Second of all, you've had two tragic events in this building. And
They claim that there are shadow figures, that they hear disembodied voices, that books will just randomly fly off the shelves on their own. Lots of poltergeist activity is noted, as well as doors slamming shut, lights flickering on and off, cold spots, obviously. So if you're familiar with Wilson Hall or this university or anything to do with this haunting, let me know, or tell me some stories if you've heard anything or know anybody that maybe went there or goes there. Tell me all the creepy stories.
We are back with another Trini Paranormal, Trini Scare Story, Trini Folklore for you today. And guess what? We went back by the hospital then. We went back by the hospital, you know why? Because yet another person have had a paranormal experience in the hospital. It's very eerie and actually very sad. But let me know what you think about this. So our follower said, hey, I have an experience I had with my son in Mount Hope, where he was admitted to the children's hospital. However, while I was there, a child was not doing too well and died the same night. But this is the scary part. The nurses told us that we were not allowed to use the children's bathroom in the ward. We would need to go down to the end of the ward to use the adult bathroom. So I needed to use the bathroom, so I walked down the aisle and looking at the room where the child died. Now I came back to my son's cot and fell asleep when I was lashed really hard on my foot. It was a really hard lash, but I did not open my eyes until the next morning with only prayers in my thoughts. It was really scary. By the way, my infant and myself was the only two in the ward. I am not making this up, but spirits are real, and the experience that I had after that, I definitely believed. Hospitals tend to be very haunted, from what I've heard. I've heard from doctors, I've heard from patients. Some people have no experiences, and then some people have very paranormal experiences. And with this, I don't know what it is. And now I don't know if it's like the child coincidentally, because a child passed away that same day, but do you think the child was trying to get somebody's attention? Because sometimes they say spirits don't know that they died. Or do you think that it's something that is evil? And before you go, don't forget to register for the Papa Boa Bolt to get this very beautiful, locally designed, locally made Papa Boa medal. So it's a virtual 5K. All you have to do is click the link in the bio and it will carry you straight to Island Miles, where you can register, or you can WhatsApp me at 2830003 and you can do the virtual 5K and get a cool part of history. It's limited edition. There's not much medals, so do sign up. You would love it. I'm very sure you're gonna love it.
The person that sent me the story called it "My Dreams Are Alternate Realities." By the way, if you have a story that you'd like to share with our community about glitches in the Matrix, dreams, aliens, cryptids, or the paranormal, you can send it to this email address. And remember, we believe you. Hi, Matrix. Hi! I've been having dreams that feel incredibly real. And the strange thing is that they almost always involve my high school crush. A little background. I had a crush on him all throughout high school. Even when we moved on to college, the feelings never completely disappeared. We attended the same university, so I would still see him from time to time. After graduation, we stayed loosely connected. One time, I saw him attending a service at our church, and I was the one who ushered him to his seat. He told me he had been attending that church since college, which was surprising because I attended the same church and had never seen him there until that day. Every once in a while, we would exchange messages, but only rarely. We talked about a lot of things: online games, hobbies, politics, our families, current events, how life had been lately, and even finances. But I always knew he saw me as a friend and nothing else. Looking back, it almost feels like life kept finding ways to reconnect us during different seasons of our lives. Then in 2025, something unusual started happening. I began dreaming about him constantly. And then I discovered your channel and your discussions about dreams and alternate realities. The idea resonated with me because these dreams felt so vivid. In those dreams, we were together. Sometimes we were already a couple, simply enjoying each other's company, going on dates, sharing playful moments, and making memories together. Other times, we were still in the early stages of getting to know each other. In some dreams, he would confess his feelings to me. In others, I would be the one confessing to him. What stood out most was how I felt when I woke up. The happiness from the dream would linger, almost as if I had actually lived through those moments. There was even a part of me that wished I could stay in those dreams where we were happy together. At the same time, I felt guilty for feeling that happiness. The weird part was how often it happened. Throughout 2025, it felt like I was dreaming about him at least once a week. Earlier this year, in 2026, I got married. Naturally, I stopped reaching out to him and moved forward with my life. But the dreams didn't stop. When 2026 began, I decided to keep track of it. For the past 5 months, I've recorded every dream involving him on my calendar. On average, he appears in my dreams 4 to 6 times a month. I swear. I know dreams are beyond my control, but I found myself looking at them differently. Instead of treating them as random events, I started seeing them as a window into another version of myself, almost like looking through a piece of glass and catching a glimpse of another timeline. I don't see these dreams as a source of regret or what ifs. Rather, I like to imagine that somewhere another version of me made different choices and ended up on a different path. When I dream about her life, she always seems happy. Sometimes I think these dreams are simply a way of checking in on the other version of myself and seeing how they're doing. And I'm genuinely happy knowing that she is happy. The end. That is so cool that you're experiencing that. Yes, a lot of times when we're dreaming, we're astral traveling to other timelines and dimensions, and you are definitely visiting some timeline where you guys are together. I'm assuming you're seeing from her, like it's as if you are her, or are you watching? Do you know what I mean? Are you watching third person, or are you her in these dreams? But I love that you're looking at it like that. Like, this is cool. I get to go check in and see how that version of me is doing. She's doing good. I'm also doing good in this version of my life. I always wonder what makes us dream certain things or go to certain places. Like, what is making you, I wonder, experience this and go to visit and check in on that version of yourself? Let me know what you guys think in the comments, and thank you so much for sharing your story. This was really cool.
Spooky scary story time. Let's read a scary story together. It was Thanksgiving 2006. We had dinner with the family, and I was 12 years old. I remember I got mad at my mom because I wanted to go to the mall for Black Friday with her and my aunt, and she had said no. So I left to my room. Me and my little sister shared a room. The room was small. We had a bunk bed, those metal bunk beds, the ones that make hella noise when you move and turn. Well, I was watching Chicken Little. It was probably about 12 a.m. when the movie finished. I turned off the lights and tried to sleep. I was laying down, facing the wall. I had my eyes closed, trying to go to sleep, when the bed started creaking. Like somebody had laid down, like somebody really heavy. I turned around, and the empty side of the mattress was sunk down, like somebody was laying down. I freaked out, but couldn't move. I tried to scream, and I couldn't. I was so scared I started crying. I closed my eyes really tight, and I let the loudest scream out. My little sister and cousin came into the room and turned the lights on. My sister hugged me, and then I told her what happened. When they turned the light on, you could see the bed sheets, all messed up, like somebody was laying there. That was definitely one experience that stuck with me. Throughout my life, I've had experiences with the paranormal, usually just seeing shadows and hearing steps, or someone trying to open doors. Back in Mexico, we had my aunt and uncle. My mom's siblings stayed over at our home when they came to visit from here, the US, to Mexico. I remember one occasion, my aunt told my sister that if she didn't behave, la mano peluda, the hairy hand, would come and get her. She freaked my sister out so much. At night, we had 2 beds in one room. I shared one bed with my mom, and my sister shared the other bed with my aunt. That night, my aunt was awoke by tapping. She said she woke up and heard tapping. Following was 3 knocks on the room's door. She believed that happened to her because she was trying to scare my sister. Who has heard of la mano peluda? I know it sounds kind of funny, like the hairy hand is going to come and get you. Like I visioned some kind of werewolf hand. But believe it or not, growing up, I used to be scared of la mano peluda. I remember my mom always telling me, like, it's going to come out like under the bed, on the side of the bed. Until this day, I do not let my feet like hang on the side of the bed, let alone my arms or anything. It's something that freaked me out since I was a child. I don't know if you guys have heard about it. I would love to hear some stories about it though.
Does anybody else think that this weather we've been having lately is kind of weird? These reoccurring storms that keep hitting the same place over and over again. Like, I know they're saying it's El Nino, and I know they're saying it's climate change, but I've never seen storms like these before. And one thing I've noticed that's really creepy, these storms always hit on the same days, man. Sunday and Wednesday. And it's like clockwork. Every week we keep getting bad storms on Sunday and Wednesday. And it's almost like the weather is being controlled or manipulated. Now, one thing that I find interesting is that anytime these bad storms happen, the day before, if you look up in the sky, you will see these lines. Some people call them contrails, but I think there's some type of aerosol that they're spraying into the sky. Now, that's just my theory. I'm not saying it's true, but I definitely think there's some kind of weather modification going on. And I think what happens is they spray this aerosol into the sky, and it creates sort of this effect where it traps moisture. And then when a weather front comes through, it interacts with that, and it basically supercharges these storms. But the problem is they can't really control how strong they become. And that is why I think they keep continuously going to the same area, because if you were to spray that same area over and over again, and that weather front continuously came through, it would interact with that aerosol, and you would have these continuous storms like we see. So is something going on with the weather? Like, are they controlling the weather, or is it just some sort of crazy idea? Is it climate change? Is it, the El Nino? But seriously, what is going on with all of these storms? This is probably the scariest case to come out of the Appalachian Mountains. Now, this one is personal to me because I actually worked on this case. Now, I had a friend who lived in North Carolina, and he was a paranormal investigator. He reaches out to me one day and is like, hey, so I got this weird case, and, I'm kind of stumped. Like, could you help me with it? Apparently, there was this Native American family who lived on the reservation, and they had a daughter who was like 16 or 17, and at the time, she was getting dropped off from a friend's house one night at her parents' home. Well, her friend drops her off, and she said when she got out of the car, she had to walk down this like bumpy, gravelly, muddy road. And she said as she's walking down this gravel road, and right next to her, is the woods, she sees this man standing on the side of the road. And she said he had this black hat on, a black cloak, and she said she couldn't really see his face at the time because it was turned. And she said as she walked a little closer to him, he turned his face, and she said he had no mouth, no nose, but these solid red eyes, and he was just staring at her. Well, she said, she walked as fast as she could to the house, and this man began like following her. So she runs inside her house, and she's like screaming, crying at this time. Her dad's like, what's going on? Like, why are you crying? And she said, there's this man out there in a hat, and like he was following me. So her dad runs out of the house and just starts looking for this guy. He doesn't find anyone. He doesn't see anything. And he's like, you sure there was a guy out there? And she's like, yeah, I seen him. Like, he was on the road, and he was like, followed me to the house. So a couple weeks pass, and they start noticing that their daughter is waking up at night from having these terrible dreams, that she is seeing this man in her room. And not only that, she is waking up with these scratches all over her body. In the next coming months, right, there was something banging on the windows, banging on the doors, right? They could hear scratching sounds coming from the roof all night long, except when the father would go and investigate and try to figure out what was going on, like he couldn't find anything. And then one night, the daughter is having like this terrible nightmare, and the mother in the other room, she could hear this going on. So she walks over to her bedroom, which the door is halfway open. She looks in, and she said she could see a man standing next to her bed with this hat and this cloak on. She goes in her room, she flips on the lights, and she said it was gone. And not only this thing was, attacking, this girl was attacking their home. It had left scratch marks on the truck, on the home. There were claw mark footprints all around the home. These are real pictures from some of the damage that it was causing and the scratch marks that it left on this girl. Now, I started looking into this case, and I started researching what we come to know today as the Hatman. And as I got deeper into this case, I started to notice weird things were happening to me. Like, I lived up in Chicago at the time, and one night I'm asleep, and I just remember it was 3 in the morning. I wake up to the sound of a scream, and I'd never heard anything like that before. So I immediately jump up. I think someone's in the house. Like, what is going on? I searched my entire home. There was no one there. The doors were locked. The windows were closed. So as I'm getting ready to go back to bed, I walk past the living room. And as I turn, sitting in a lazy boy recliner is what looks like a man in a cloak and a hat, just rocking. And I look again, he's gone. But I could see movement of the chair, and that's someone obviously had bumped it or had been sitting in it. And that like sent chills down my back. And I immediately like went into the bedroom, closed the door. And mysteriously, as all of this started, it just one day stopped. And to me, what I thought personally was this was a case of the Hatman.
Let's read a scary Home Alone story. I was 14. It was an average night around 9 p.m. Me and my little cousin were at his house. I'm babysitting for the night while my mom and my aunt are shopping and my dad and uncle are out at the movie theater. So we're sitting there and I was feeling really strange. Something was wrong, but I couldn't put my finger on it. So I just kept watching TV with my cousin. The feeling wasn't going away, so I got up and walked to the door to lock it. When I came back through the kitchen, I saw what was causing my weird feeling. In the window, there was a very decrepit-looking man, just staring into the window, looking at my cousin. Protective mode turned on. I pretended like I didn't see the guy, and I told my little cousin that we needed to go upstairs because our parents would be home soon and they wouldn't want him being up so late. So I went upstairs and put him to bed, knowing damn well there was a man outside that wanted in. I was about 125 pounds and 5'8" at the time, and I played football for my school. If I remember correctly, I went downstairs and straight into the kitchen and grabbed one of those meat tenderizing hammers, turned back to the window there where I saw him before. He wasn't there. I ran back to the front door and checked that it was locked. Both deadbolt and the knob were locked. Ran back upstairs with the meat hammer and went into my cousin's room and sat down in front of the door. He asked me what I was doing, and I said that he didn't need to worry about it and that he should just keep his head low. I called the cops and then my dad and uncle. Cops would take a half hour and my dad and uncle were 45 minutes away. Then I hear a window shatter and the sound of heavy boots walking around on the main floor. I told my cousin to stay calm, hide under the covers, and keep silent. I could hear the guy walking around downstairs, and it was horrifying. I gripped the meat hammer and waited. About 5 minutes pass, then I hear Boots walking upstairs. I heard him opening doors to my aunt and uncle's bedroom, then the bathroom. He walked back downstairs, and I heard him open the door to the basement. 15 minutes later, the police show up and burst into the house. Turned out the guy was loose from a mental hospital, 1 province away.
One of the things I often tell people is do not play with a Ouija board, because Ouija boards are essentially a doorway. And when you open that door, anything can come through. It's almost like setting up this beacon up in the air, and you are inviting everything to come into your life. Now, I heard this story. There was this young boy named Colton. And Colton and his buddies decided they were going to play with a Ouija board one night. And they had fun. They didn't know how this pendulum was moving by itself, and it kind of thrilled them and everything, but they didn't think anything of it. So Colton, he takes the Ouija board and he puts it in his closet. Later that night, when he's sleeping, he starts hearing like a banging sound in his closet. And all of a sudden, when he jumps up out of bed, he looks over at his closet and the door slowly opens. And he gets up and looks in the closet. There's no one in there. So he's like, that's kind of weird, but he kind of shakes it off, right? The next night when he's in his bedroom once again, right? He's laying down in his bed. He can't sleep. All of a sudden he hears this banging sound again coming from the closet, and the closet door opens by itself. The next morning when he wakes up, he finds the Ouija board is sitting on his bed. So he thinks, I am done with this Ouija board. I shouldn't have messed with it. I'm done with this. So he takes it out back and he starts a fire and he starts trying to burn this Ouija board. As he's burning this thing and it's on fire, he hears just disembodied voices. He hears screams, and he thinks, okay, this thing is just ashes now. Everything's fine. Well, it was for a couple weeks, nothing happened.
Until one night he wakes up and he said he just felt like the air was like very thick. And he had his bedroom door open at the time. Well, all of a sudden his bedroom door slams shut and his bed just starts shaking violently. And he said, it felt like there was an earthquake. He jumps out of bed and stuff on his shelf just starts flying at him across the room. And so he, is running to the door, trying to get the door open, but something like is holding it shut. He starts screaming, for his parents. And when his parents come, the door unlocks. He opens the door and he tells his parents, what had happened. They don't believe him. So he said, things just kept getting significantly worse. And every night he was just like tormented by something. And he said, about 6-7 months into this happening, right, this thing tormenting him, he goes over to his grandma's house one day. And when he walks into his grandma's house and stuff, he starts talking to her and he looks over on a shelf. She has a Ouija board on the shelf. And he's like, wait a second, that is the Ouija board that I burned in the fire, the box and everything. And he goes, Grandma, where did you get that? Do you know what that is? And she goes, oh no, honey, someone left a board game on my front door. And so I brought it in, but I couldn't figure out how to play it. And he said, give me that. And he grabbed it and he takes off running with it, right? So he takes it out into the woods. He buries this thing. And he thinks, okay, maybe this is the end of it. And once again, same thing every night, just stuff is happening. Stuff's flying across the room. His bed is shaking, he starts waking up with scratches all over his body. He starts smelling a very foul sulfur smell in his room. And so he goes to a person who is a paranormal investigator and says, what do I do? Like, I ever since I've messed with this Ouija board, something has been following me and like attached to me. And this paranormal investigator said, well, basically, you need to go take this Ouija board and, say that I renounce you. I do not accept you into my life. Like, I am not inviting you. You need to leave. So he goes back out into the woods where he had buried this Ouija board, except it's dug up and it's not there anymore. And so he said, after that, like, it sort of, everything stopped for a little while. It came back, but it was very sporadic. But he said still to this day, like, stuff happens to him from messing with the Ouija board.
3 men came for both my father and I in the middle of the night, and we both wrote our unique experiences off as trauma due to what we were experiencing at the time, until we realized years later that we had had the same experience. This story came from someone I'm going to call Jay, because I'm not sure if she wanted me to use her real name or not. And she said her experience happened when she was 5 years old. Her family was going through a really, really rough time. Her father was being accused of something very, very serious by the federal government, and there were federal charges against him. Jay says that her father was extremely loving and attentive, and he never abused his children in any way. And the DA didn't really have any evidence against him, but this all stemmed from a story that she had told her teacher about bath time. And this happened in the 1980s, when she says there was a real witch hunt for abusive parents, and families were being torn apart over suspicion alone. And as this was all going on, she began to have very vivid, terrifying nightmares in which 3 men would come to her in the middle of the night and take her out of her bed. One of the men felt very good and very safe, and like Jay could trust him. One of the men felt very bad, and the third felt like he was just there to witness what was happening. And on one of these particular nights, she is having this dream. They ask her, does she want to come and see their aircraft? She remembers getting out of bed in her pajamas, walking through the sliding glass doors of the back patio with her stuffed animal in hand, and walking up to the aircraft that was parked in their backyard. The bad man wanted her to get inside, and the good man told her she had a choice. She chose not to go. They walked her back to her bed and tucked her in, and she fell back asleep. They came again another night, but didn't seem to bother her. Instead, she remembers them taking her sister through the bedroom window. In the mornings, she would remember these as nightmares, and after the family moved and her father's charges were dropped, she stopped having these nightmares entirely. She eventually forgot about all of these dreams after her father was acquitted, but recently they were having a conversation, and he told her that when he was going through this series of allegations, he believed that he had experienced alien abductions. He described waking up to a bright light filling the room, 3 men entering, and then taking him through the back sliding glass patio door. He told Jay that he believed that these dreams at the time were due to the extreme stress that he was under while dealing with these allegations, because not only was he being charged by the federal government, but everyone around him was distancing themselves as well. His friends disappeared, his support vanished, and his entire life had collapsed as a result of these allegations. He said that he believed that it would have been natural for someone under this amount of stress to experience delusions and hallucinations. And he categorized these memories as such brought on by trauma. But as he told her about these dreams that he had had while going through this period of his life, it brought back all of her own memories, and then she remembered something that she hadn't before. Before all of this had happened, she remembered a time that her sister had told her about a dream she had in which she was taken by 3 men into a craft outside their back door. At the time, Jay says she just assumed she was imagining things, and her sister, and her father had never discussed these shared dreams before. But then her father revealed something even stranger. He said, "I never told anyone, but I believe that there was certain government agents living above us at the time that we lived in that apartment." And Jay's like, "Why do you think that?" And he said, "Well, the entire time we lived there, the place was vacant, but I would often hear footsteps walking around, things dropping, doors closing." And he became convinced that someone was living up there. And then Jay remembered the warning that her parents had given her as a child, and they told her that if you ever hear noises upstairs, you'll come get us, right? She also had a strange memory come back in which her father stormed upstairs and was pounding on the vacant apartment door, yelling, "I know you're in there." She said she's not sure why he believed that there were 3 men, but he said that it had something to do with he could tell the difference in their footsteps. She says there is a lot of mystery in her family, despite her father's charges being dropped. Like, for years after the fact, her mother remained worried and concerned that their phones were tapped. When the family was out, she often expressed that she felt like they were being followed, though she never went into detail to the children as to who was actually following them. So she says, while she always dismissed her own memories as a product of stress and trauma because of how damaging these allegations were to her family, what she can explain is how the entire family has a shared hallucination that they didn't even know each other was experiencing until years later. She said, "We haven't talked about it until recently because I think that the fear of sounding irrational or crazy keeps you quiet, even with people that you're close to." But she said she's sharing this to hear what everybody else thinks, because now that she is talking about it, she's not sure what she experienced. And she said she will add that at the time that all of this was happening, she remembers going through rigorous testing at school. She remembers being pulled out of class often to do tests that dealt with ink blots, with a pink drink, with hearing tests, Morse code, and puzzles. And she says that she does believe this was related to the GATE program, though the program that she was in was not called as such. And as a child, she assumed that all of those tests were related to the investigation that the government was doing into her father. But as she has learned more, she realizes that there are others like her who have had tests like this, who have also reported unusual experiences like her as well. She also added that both she and her sister are dyslexic, and her sister is also bipolar, though her dad swears that neither of them had any learning disabilities or issues until the investigation. Let her know your thoughts. She'll be seeing the comments even though I kept her anonymous.
When I was 19 years old, I worked at a grocery store and I stocked shelves. The store, we were open 24 hours, so we had people coming in late at night all the time. It wasn't anything weird. There was one night where a lady came in and she was purchasing a birthday cake and some candles. She also had balloons and a disposable camera. She looked like she was definitely in a hurry. She was just trying to get out of there. As I was handing her the receipt, she asked me a really weird question. She said, "Do you know what day it is?" And I told her the date, and she said, "Okay, good." Weird, right? She left, and then the following night she came back and she bought the same thing. She had a birthday cake, candles, balloons, disposable camera. And I just kind of made a joke with her. I'm like, "Oh, you must just really love birthdays." And she looked really confused back at me and she just said, "Do you know what day it is?" So I let her know the date again, and then she looked relieved and she left. She was an older woman, so I figured that maybe she had Alzheimer's or dementia or something of that sort, right? The third night she came in again, and she was purchasing the exact same items. And she asked me the exact same question. This time I looked at her and I said, "Have we met before?" Just to see what she would say to test my theory, right? And she looked irritated and she paid and then left. After she left, I mentioned it to my manager and he pulled me back into the office and he said, "Yeah, we've had several other employees file about this lady, talk about her." And I guess the crazy part was the first incident that she had was back in 1997. And attached to her file and the security footage was actually like a little picture of her. And she looked exactly the same. She wasn't older, she wasn't younger. Same face, like same clothing. I guess she would just come in like for a few days asking for the same items, and then she would disappear for a while, and it would happen every so often. There was a little final note on the bottom of her file, and it was written by an old employee. They quit like years ago, right? And it said, I finally asked what happens if I give her the wrong date. And then underneath that was another employee, and they wrote, don't.
Let me tell you what I saw in the Appalachian Mountains. Welcome to the Creepy Cozy Cottage, where creepy and cozy meet. So grab a blanket and get cozy, because we're about to read a creepy story. Between the ages of 10 to 13, I lived in Kentucky in the foothills of one of the oldest mountain ranges on the planet. I lived with my dad and my grams. We lived in what we called a holler. Think of it like a cul-de-sac in between a set of foothills. We lived in the middle of a neighborhood with nothing but family on both sides. No one lived across from us or behind us because of the foothills. When I moved in, my grams had some rules I had to follow. I chalked them up to hillbilly stranger danger. Things like don't mess around with the wild animals, don't go out into the woods alone, and then they got a little weird. Don't whistle. If you hear your name, don't answer, and don't go to it. And if you see someone in the woods, you might know. No, you didn't, and just come home. This experience happened in August when I was 11. My dad and I had mowed a path through the tall grass. We camped out there a lot because it was close enough that we could check on grams. Now, when you're in the woods, things are louder than you think. You have animal life, bugs chattering, wind through the trees and grass. There was a stream that ran along the wood you could easily hear. That night, we added the campfire to the list. My dad decided to go back up to the house at about a quarter of a mile to get more beer and check on grams. Before he left, he told me not to mess with the fire. After a few minutes of watching the fire, things started to get quiet. Real quiet. The wind had all but stopped. Bug and animal sounds were all gone, and the stream sounded like it was miles away. I was getting uncomfortable even though I'd been left at the campground before like this. Then I started to smell and taste it. It was in the back of my throat and out of nowhere. This awful metal tang. After a few moments of dread, my dad came back. He was mad right away, said he couldn't smell burning metal coming up the trail. He accused me of tossing beer cans in the fire. I told him I didn't, and he even pointed to the fire to prove it. He said there was a storm coming in, and we needed to get back home and let it go. We left the tent and started our way back. Now, the very cool but very weird thing about lightning in woods this dense is when the lightning hits, it lights up everything like the middle of the day. Well, up until the front of the trees. After the first set of trees, it's pitch black. There are no street lights, and unless you have lights on your property, it's completely black. So it's pitch black, lightly raining, and other than the dim lights from the house windows, there's nothing. I'm eating watermelon as one does in August in the mountains when the first clap of lightning hits. Everything is as bright as it can be. After the second passes, it's black. Next clap of lightning comes, and that's when I kind of see it. On the porch, past the yard, over the stream, past the road, and the ditches on either side, just past the first line of trees, I could see the silhouette of it. Then it goes dark. This is also when I start to taste that same awful burning metal. I'm not really sure what I saw, so I just kind of stay still. It's a few moments before the lightning hits again. The figure is now closer, standing side by side to the trees. Then it's back again. I'm standing now, not sure what to do. It's been 20 years, and to this day I've tried, but could never fully describe what I saw. The thing's head wasn't proportioned to its body. The arms were too long for the torso to fit right. It was like you asked a blind person to draw what a person might look like. Once the lightning hit again, the thing was standing in the middle of the road. Not wanting to see this thing get any closer, I go inside. My grams is doing dishes and asks why I'm inside. I tell her I think I saw something. She almost immediately gets my dad on his feet, telling him to shut and lock all the windows and doors. My dad, vaguely drunk, obeys. That night, I slept with her. The next day, we discovered the tent doors torn off. It didn't look like an animal. Things weren't cut or shredded. It looked like someone took and pulled it apart. My uncle, who lived a mile or so up, had 8 chickens all killed. Heads gone, no blood. The next few weeks, all the kids had to wait for the bus with an adult. My dad had to be late for work for almost 3 weeks. Anytime I tried to talk about it, I just had the subject changed. I just figured I was a kid and it wasn't important or real. It wasn't until years later I finally understood. I was in my 20s and had some cousins that were in town for Halloween. As I was telling the story, my aunt got irate with me, saying, "Don't you tell them that. Don't you put evil on them." After I couldn't help but think back on all the times I tried to talk about it and how I was shunned. My kid mind not realizing it wasn't as simple as a subject change, but then actively shushing me. After doing some research, I realized there was a name for this thing, the same name my aunt had called it that day at the party, and other people have seen it, the Goatman. What bothers me the most is how to this day, I couldn't describe any feature, nor have I ever tasted that awful burning metal taste. So if you ever find yourself in the foothills of Kentucky, remember my Graham's rule.
Want to get creeped out? Let's talk about someone else who tried the shoebox telephone game. This is one of those stories where you are inviting something in and what you expect to arrive might not be what actually arrives. This one is honestly terrifying. And if you don't know what the shoebox telephone game is, it is essentially where someone writes a letter to someone who has passed away, someone that they cared for. They create this telephone with a shoebox, and the person who has passed away is supposed to contact that person through a dream. Then they listen to the phone and get a message from their deceased loved one. I have a video on it if you want the full explanation. So this story is about Marcos, and he actually wanted to talk to his aunt who had passed away. He had been super close with her. She had always been over at his house hanging out with his mom, and so he wrote her a letter about how he missed her, what was going on in his life, wanting to know if she's okay. So he does not have a dream about his aunt. However, he wakes up one night and hears a knocking on his closet door. Not good. He goes inside his closet and there is a rotten smell inside, which is double not good. He immediately breaks the thread on the shoebox telephone and burns the paper cup because he's immediately like, this isn't right. A couple nights later, he is watching TV with his mom when they hear footsteps upstairs. No one else is home with them. On another night, he wakes up and notices his closet door is open, even though he always keeps it shut. Especially lately since he's been freaked out and heard the knocking and smelled the smell and heard the footsteps. He's laying in bed. He has this overwhelming feeling that he's not alone and he feels genuinely terrified. Nothing else happens that night, but he does not sleep, which is fair. The next day, he's supposed to go to his college classes. He doesn't go because he's so tired. He spends all day crying because he's afraid, but he's also grieving his aunt. And this was supposed to be potentially a way for him to have some kind of positive contact with his aunt, and clearly it's not going that way. However, he falls asleep on the couch and has a dream about his aunt that day. And what she tells him in the dream is really beautiful. She tells him that she is always with him and that he doesn't need to do a ritual to talk to her. She also says he doesn't have to worry anymore, and she promises he'll be safe now. He wakes up from that dream with an overwhelming sense of calm and peace, and he falls asleep easily that night for the first time in weeks. And nothing else has happened since. So that is a really weird one and also a really creepy one.
I worked alone at a mortuary, and one night I heard something moving that shouldn't have been moving at all. Scary story time. I've gone back and forth about posting this because I know how it sounds. I worked at a mortuary for a little over 2 years, mostly doing paperwork and helping with transfers. I'm not a doctor and I'm not trying to convince anyone that something supernatural happened. Maybe there's an explanation for it. I just know what happened, and it's one of the reasons I stopped taking overnight shifts. This all happened sometime in 2021. I was covering for a coworker, so I ended up working alone from midnight until the morning staff arrived. It wasn't unusual. Nights were normally quiet. Most of the time, I'd spend a few hours doing paperwork, cleaning equipment, or just sitting in the office drinking coffee. Around 2 a.m., I was in the office watching videos on my phone when I heard a loud metallic sound from down the hall. Not a bong, more like something had fallen over. At first, I thought maybe I had imagined it, but a few seconds later, I heard it again. I got up and checked the hallway. Nothing. Everything looked normal. I checked the preparation room, the storage area, and even stepped outside to see if someone had come in through the back entrance. Nobody. I remember actually being annoyed more than scared because I thought something had tipped over and I'd have to clean it up. I went back to the office. Maybe 10 minutes later, the phone rang. Now, if you've never worked in a place like that, calls at night aren't uncommon. Hospitals sometimes call ahead before sending someone over. I answered, no one spoke. I said hello twice, nothing. Then whoever it was hung up on the other side. Wrong number, I figured. A few minutes after that, I heard wheels very clearly, like a stretcher being rolled across the floor. That sound immediately got my attention because anyone who's worked around hospitals knows exactly what the wheels sound like. I stepped into the hallway expecting to see somebody. No one. And then the sound stopped. That was the first moment I actually felt uncomfortable. I checked my phone and saw it was 2:43 a.m. I remembered that time because I looked at it twice. I walked through the hall again and everything was exactly where it should have been. Nothing moved, nothing out of place. I told myself I was tired. Around 3:15 a.m., I went to make coffee, and as I was standing by the machine, I heard what sounded like someone knocking on the office door. 3 knocks. Not loud, just loud enough to hear. I honestly thought one of the drivers had arrived early, but when I opened the door, there was nobody there. I even stepped outside, empty parking lots, no cars, nothing. At this point, I called one of my coworkers just to talk because I didn't like how quiet the building felt. He laughed and said I was freaking myself out, and maybe he was right. Around 4 a.m., I started doing paperwork. That's when I heard the wheels again, this time closer. Slowly rolling, not fast, not squeaky, just that soft sound of rubber wheels moving across the floor. I froze and listened, then it stopped. I sat there for maybe 30 seconds before getting up and wishing I hadn't, because one of the transport stretchers that had been parked against the wall was no longer straight. It had moved out slightly, not much, maybe 6 inches. Could I have been remembering it wrong? Honestly, maybe, but I could have sworn it was pushed all the way back before. By 6 a.m., the morning stuff arrived and I didn't mention any of it. I figured out I'd sound stupid, and a few days later, I finally told one of the older guys about it. He just looked at me and asked, "Was it around 3 in the morning?" I said, "Yeah." He nodded like I confirmed something. Then he told me not to worry about it. Said weird noises happen in old buildings. But before he walked away, he stopped and said something that bothered me more than anything else. He said, "You're not the first person who'd mentioned hearing the wheels." I didn't ask him what he meant, and he didn't explain. I worked there for another 6 months. Nothing like that ever happened again, but I never volunteered for another overnight shift. And every now and then, whenever I hear those rubber wheels in a hospital hallway, I think about that night. And I still remember checking that empty hall at 2:43 in the morning, wondering who or what I thought I heard. And that's the end of the story. So if you worked alone at night at that building and you heard those wheels, would you have stayed or what would you have done? Let me know.
This story was sent to me by a follower named Katerina, and she's a licensed mortician from Louisiana. And according to her, what happened during her first year while working in a funeral home is the main reason she will never ever again be able to be alone with a body after midnight. So, Katerina told me that this happened back in 2018 when she was about 24 years old and she had been working at a small family-owned funeral home for about a year. And she said she absolutely loved the job, right? The quietness of it, the dignity of helping others and their families, and that strange sense of peace that came with preparing someone for their final viewing in their final days. Now, by then, she had already embalmed dozens of people, elderly individuals, accident victims, hospice patients. Death itself did not scare her at all anymore. But one particular night changed all of that. Now, she had stayed late to finish preparing an elderly woman who had passed away peacefully in her sleep. And according to Katerina, the woman was in her late 80s, deeply religious, and her family had requested a private viewing that very next morning. And it was already close to 11:30 p.m. at this time, and everyone else that she had worked with had already gone home for the night. So it was just her, right? A radio playing softly in the prep room and the woman resting on the stainless steel table nearby. And Katerina remembers feeling a little uneasy that night. At first it was normal, but by now she was so used to it. But on this night, it was different. And she blamed it on being tired, and as she gathered her supplies and began cleaning up, she noticed something very odd. The radio that she had with her kept changing stations over and over. And at first she assumed it was maybe poor reception, so she'd adjust it, and a few minutes later, complete static. Then another station again, and static yet again. And eventually she just shut it off entirely, and that's when she heard it. Someone was humming very, very softly. And she said she could tell that it was an older woman humming, and it sounded like a church hymn. And she immediately froze, and the sound seemed to be coming from the hallway that was just outside of the prep room. and she stepped into the hallway expecting maybe to see someone that she worked with or the funeral director, but there was nobody, absolutely nothing. The building was empty, and she checked the front doors and they were locked. The offices were empty, the chapel was dark and empty, so she even looked outside and there were not even any cars in the parking lot, so there was no movement. She laughed nervously to herself and told herself, maybe she was hearing things, or maybe it was, like the generator shutting down or starting. Oh, she was trying to rationalize it. Now, until she walked back into the prep room and the radio was on again, and it was playing a very similar hymn that she had heard just moments before by this mysterious voice that was humming it in the hallway, and she swears that she had unplugged it. Now, she remembers standing there staring at it, trying to convince herself that maybe she had simply forgotten, right? Then she noticed something that made her stomach drop even more. The elderly woman's hands that had been folded neatly on her abdomen before Katerina left the room, one was now resting at the elderly woman's side. And Katerina immediately started to rationalize it, right, to herself. Maybe, it was rigor relaxation. Maybe she accidentally bumped into the table. Maybe she remembered positioning them incorrectly before she walked out. So she repositioned them again, and she folded them again, and she took a deep breath, and she finished gathering her things, and she turned off all the lights. And as she reached the door, the radio came blaring back on again, and it went right into like a static mode. And through it, she heard a woman's voice very clearly and very softly say, "Child, don't leave me in the dark." And Katerina said every hair on her body stood up. She turned around instantly to look at the woman that that was lying peacefully on the table, and the room was completely silent, and she bolted out of there. She locked the prep room and she sat in her car crying for almost 20 minutes before calling her supervisor. She was so overwhelmed with emotions and feelings. Now, that next morning, she reluctantly came back to work, and her supervisor listened to her story without laughing or judging her. And in fact, according to Katerina, he became unusually serious at that moment, and then he told her something that she'd never heard before. The elderly woman had spent nearly 40 years singing in her church choir, and she hated sleeping with the lights off, that very same woman that she was working on. And according to her daughter, whenever she was afraid as a child, she'd tell herself, "Jesus won't leave me alone in the dark." And Katerina said that she still works as a mortician to this very day, but she says she has one rule that she never breaks, and no matter how busy she is, no matter who is on the table, if she has to leave a prep room after midnight, she always leaves one light on out of respect. And just in case someone is still afraid of the dark even after life. Let me know what you guys think in the comments.
Have you ever got a bad feeling about someone, and for some reason you knew something was off with them? Now, that's our intuition telling us to beware, to watch out. Now, there was this girl named Sarah. Sarah lived in Los Angeles, and she said one night, her and her friends, they decided to go to this concert. She said they were up on this top row on this balcony, and they were watching this band play, and it was amazing. She said as she sat up in her seat, she looked over and she sees this man. She said he was very well dressed. He had this blue eyes, this bright blonde hair that was slicked over to the side. And she said he just had this big, huge smile on his face. And she noticed that he was staring at her. But for some reason, deep down in her stomach, she got this feeling like something was off about this guy. She felt like he was evil. And she said she could almost feel inside of her like he was stealing her soul. So she said after about 10 or 15 minutes, she noticed this guy did not break from staring at her. She started to feel a little creeped out. So she gets her friend's attention and she tells her, "Hey, look at this guy over here. Is he not staring at me?" And her friend is like, "You know what? He's kind of cute. If you don't like him, I want to talk to him." So her friend walks over to this guy and she starts talking with him, and they're having this big long conversation. And then all of a sudden, her friend brings this guy over to where she's at. She said the guy just smiled at her. And when he looked directly into her eyes, she said she felt just horrible. She knew this man was evil. So she said for probably the next hour or so,
this guy just hung out with him. And she said he didn't say a lot, but he constantly was staring at her. So she just couldn't like stand it anymore. She's like, you know what, I need to leave. So she tells her friend, like, I'm gonna go outside and get some fresh air. So she exits the venue, she goes out front, and she said she just was kind of standing there when out of the door walks this guy. She said the guy slowly made his way towards her direction. And when he got within a few feet of her, he said he just looked at her directly in her eyes. And she felt almost kind of in this daze. She said he made a few steps closer. And the next thing she knew, this man was grabbing her arms. And she tried to move, she tried to get away. She said he would just grab tighter and tighter. And as he looked into her eyes, she said he no longer had any pupils. His whole entire eye had just turned black. And she said she couldn't scream. She felt like she couldn't get away. And she was terrified. She said all of a sudden her friends come running out of the door. And as she looks, this guy was gone. And she tells her friends, like, you know, this guy was just attacking me, like that guy we met in there. And she said, you know, the reason we came outside was because the security guard came up to us and asked, who is that guy? Like, he didn't have a bracelet on, like he wasn't supposed to be in here. And so she said the rest of the night, she just kept thinking about that experience over and over again. Was that guy real? Who was he? And was he some type of evil presence? So what do you think? Have you ever had a bad feeling around someone? People who work the night shift often have supernatural encounters. Now, there was a story that came out of Arizona. There's this man named Edward. Edward said he got a job right outside of the Navajo reservation at this small gas station. Now, he said his manager, this older Native American man, he told him before he started this job, he said, there's one thing you must know. There is a set of rules that I have when you work night shift here at this gas station. He said the first rule, now this is the most important rule. When it strikes midnight, you must lock the front door and do not unlock it ever until the morning. He said the second rule, if someone comes to that door and they want to come in after midnight, do not let them in. Even if it seems like they need help, even if it seems like someone you know, do not let anybody into the gas station after midnight. And he said, because they aren't really people. He goes, Edward's like, what do you mean? And he said, I can't talk about it, but just make sure you do not let them in. And he said the third rule is you must keep the lights on all night long. Don't ever let the lights go out. And if the power goes out, you are to turn this lantern on and some of these flashlights, but do not let it get dark in here. And he said the fourth rule, you must never answer the phone after midnight. He said even if it continuously rings like someone important is trying to get a hold of you, do not pick up that phone. So Edward was like, okay, you know, at the time he just kind of thought it was ridiculous, but he's like, all right, I'll do it. So he works at this gas station for several months and he listens to what this man tells him. And he locks the door at night, he keeps the lights on, and he doesn't let anyone in. Well, this one night, there was a really bad monsoon, and it was raining, and there was lightning and thunder, and it struck midnight on the clock. So he locked the door. At 12:01, he hears a knock at the door. And when he goes to the front door, and he looks out the glass, he sees this woman. She is completely soaked. She's muddy. Her eyes look very wide. She looks in distress and like something is wrong. And she goes, please, please let me in. You have to let me in. And she's, you know, crying and screaming, banging on this window. And he's like, look, I'm sorry, we're closed. Like, I cannot let you in. And she goes, no, please, you don't understand. You have to let me in. And she, you know, banging harder and harder. And he's like, I told you we're closed. Go away. He said, that's when this woman, you know, at the time, you could see her from this light that was outside. It was shining on her. But when she stepped outside of this light, he said that's when he noticed her face started to change. She didn't look human anymore. She looked like some kind of monster. And he said she just twisted her head to the side and she took off running. And instantly he got this feeling of dread, like something was wrong. Well, he said all night long, he could hear stuff yelling at him from outside, telling him to open the door. Some of these voices sounded like his family members, friends. And he said all night long, something was harassing him. Well, that freaked him out, but he really needed this job. So he was there for a couple more months. And then he said one night, the worst thing happened. They had a blackout and the power was completely gone. And he said it was completely dark in this gas station. Now, he locked the doors and everything, but he remembered what that old man told him. Do not let it get dark in here. So he scrambles to find this lantern, and he starts trying to get it lit. He can hear stuff moving around, and he can see shadows of things running around the gas station, and he can hear this laughter, and he can hear banging sounds coming from outside, like something was trying to get in. Finally, he manages to get this lantern on, but all night long, once again, he could see things running around. He could hear voices calling him, telling him to come out of the light. And the next morning, he was so terrified, he quit this job. And he said that was probably the most terrifying job he had ever worked, working night shift at a small gas station outside of the Navajo reservation. Living next to the woods can be creepy. It's not for everyone, because you will see things, you will hear things. It can get very weird. And there is a particular set of rules that if you find yourself living next to the woods or the forest, that you should follow. Now, the first rule is at nighttime, always lock your doors, always close your curtains. Also, at nighttime, never look out the window facing the woods. If you hear a knock at your door at nighttime, do not answer it, especially if it is your back door. You will see lights coming from the woods. Do not follow them. Do not try and communicate with them. Just ignore them. And the most important thing you must remember is that anything you see outside, most likely it's not real. You are not seeing it, or you are not hearing it. Now, this story comes out of Tennessee. There's this man named Christian. Christian said that at one point in time, he grew up in this farmhouse that was out in the boonies. And he said they lived deep, deep in the woods, and it was a dirt road that took several miles to get to their house. And they literally had no neighbors around. Well, he said when they first moved in, there was a lot of weird stuff that would happen. For instance, the dogs didn't want to go anywhere near the woods. They would get to the tree line and they would turn around. And it was like they were afraid of something. They also noticed these deer. They would come into their yard at night and they would just be staring out into the woods like they were scared of something. And then one night, something very strange happened. So it was about 11 o'clock at night. And on the back door, they hear boom, 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 a knock. And that's when his father goes to the back door and he opens it up. There was no one out there. He said as he looked out into the woods, he started to hear screams. And it sounded like someone was in trouble. So he said he got up and him and his father went outside and they started looking around. They couldn't see anybody. So eventually they called the police. And the police came out and they searched the area. They couldn't find anyone. Well, on a regular basis, they started hearing screams outside their house coming from the woods. And every night, something would be knocking on their back door. A few times, they found the back door wide open. The other weird thing that started happening is Christian's brother started having these weird nightmares. And not only was he having nightmares, he started to sleepwalk. And he would get up from his bed, he'd walk down the hallway into the kitchen and out the back door. And right before he would get into the woods, his dad or his mom would stop him and wake him up. And, this happened several times. Well, eventually his father put up like a camera outside because he was trying to figure out who's knocking on the back door. And one day he looks at the video and he sees his son going out the back door. And he notices he just starts looking around like he's looking for something out in the woods, like something was calling him. And finally, his father comes running out and stops him. So the father started to get really creeped out. He told Christian and his brothers and sisters, do not go out in the woods. And he said that's when one night there was a very loud banging sound coming from the back door. And it was almost like someone was trying to get in this door. So he said his father grabs a baseball bat. He goes to the back door and he opens it. And he looks around and out of the corner of his eyes, he sees something moving in the woods. So he said his father started to make his way towards the wood line. And that's when he sees something run back further into the woods. So his father starts to go into the woods down this trail. And he said he could see this thing from a distance. And he noticed when he would kind of move, it would move. Or when he would turn to the right, it would turn to the right. Or when he would turn to the left, he would turn to the left. And he said whatever he would do, whatever movement he would do, this thing would follow. And he said that's when he realized whatever this was, it was almost like looking at a mirror. This thing was copying him. It was following his every movement. So his father turns around, takes off running through the woods, gets back in the house, and tells everyone Get in the vehicle, we are leaving. And they moved that night and left everything behind in the house. And he said still to this day, he has nightmares whenever he's near the woods because he still thinks about his time living in that place. When it comes to skinwalkers, New Mexico is number one. Then you have Arizona, and third, I would say, is Texas. Now, more specifically, the western region of Texas has a significant number of skinwalker sightings. This specific story takes place outside of Odessa, Texas, right near the New Mexico border. There was this rancher named Roy. Roy purchased this 1,000-acre ranch, and when he first moves onto the property, he said he was confronted by this Native American man. And he said this man told him that on your property are these mounds. And he said, those are burial mounds. They're sacred to my people. Whatever you do, do not disturb them. He said, use all of the land, but leave those mounds alone. So Roy said, okay, whatever, I'm not anticipating touching them even. So after a year of Roy living on this ranch, he needed to expand and he needed to grow his ranch. So he started looking into this area where the mounds were. And one day he brings his tractor out there and gets ready to kind of clear this land. Well, as he started up his tractor and started to go towards the mound, he said he started to hear what sounded almost like Native American music and chants. And he said the closer he got to these mounds, the louder it got. And then finally, he said he heard a really loud, hey. And when he looked over out behind the mounds, he said there was a Native American man standing there. And he had these glowing eyes. And he was there for a brief second, and then he just disappeared. So Roy was like, okay, this is weird, like maybe I need to get some sleep. So he goes back to his house and he lays down. Well, later that night, he awakes to just kind of like a very stillness in the air. And he said that's when he heard very clearly something say, get out of here now. And a second time he hears it, get out of here now. And a third time, get out of here now. So he jumps up out of bed and he goes all around his house. He cannot find anyone. And he has no idea where this sound is coming from. And that's when he hears it a fourth time and he goes over to his window in the bedroom. And when he looks out, he said he's seen this owl sitting up in the tree. And as he looked directly at this owl, it said, get out of here now. And then he said it flew off into the tree and up into the sky. So a couple weeks pass and he's like, you know what? I got to clear that field. Like I got to take out those mounds and expand the ranch. So he goes out there again with his tractor. And as he begins to start clearing these mounds, he said that's when he's seen this pack of coyotes. And they started coming closer and closer towards him. And he noticed that their eyes were glowing. And he said they would not let him get anywhere near these mounds. And that scared him. So much so that he went back to the house and said, I will never touch those mounds again. And still to this day, those mounds sit there untouched.
Back in college, one of my good friends bought a police scanner at a yard sale, and we spent a lot of nights listening to it when we would get bored. There was one specific night that I remember though. It was around 3 a.m. and we noticed that it was like a weird call that was coming in. The dispatcher asked the officer to go check on a car that was on a county road. The officer responded normally. They went to the location and they arrived. Then there was silence for a while. There was no update. And so the dispatcher finally said like, hey, like, is there an update? Like, what's the status report? And the officer that went to the location, he got back on and his voice was a lot quieter and he just said, the vehicle is occupied. The dispatcher asked if they needed assistance and the officer responded back, no, they're waiting. And we just kind of looked at each other like, waiting for what? So the dispatcher asked the question again and it was another really long silence. And then the officer responded. They said they don't know yet. And then the transmission literally cut out. So they sent a second officer and they sent a third officer out. After that, the channel randomly switched to a different frequency and we just figured we would never know. But the next day we did get curious and we wanted to drive out to the location. We were driving out. It wasn't a hard place to find. It was like the only spot to pull off in the location. And the weird part was there was no signs of like really activity. There wasn't any vehicles there. Honestly, there wasn't even any tire tracks. But we did notice on the guardrail that there was a sentence. And it was written like somebody was in a hurry. Like it wasn't neatly done. And it said, we waited too. Kind of an eerie thing, but we just kind of joked about it. And then we left and went home. And then that same night, middle of the night, probably like 1:30ish a.m., there was another call, and the dispatcher asked about that same location, and an officer was going to that area. They were totally different people. You could tell the voices weren't the same as the night before. The first thing that the responding officer said once he got there was, "There's a car here." And the dispatcher said, "Is anybody inside?" And the officer responded back, "Not anymore."
Get ready with me while I tell you guys a little about myself. I'm Ellie, and I tell ghost stories that you guys send in. Ellie is not my real name. It's a play on my actual name, and my name on TikTok is Ellie Brary, which is a play on my name and the word library because I love to read. And I feel like this TikTok account has kind of just turned into like a library of ghost stories that you guys send in. Me and the paranormal are not strangers. I have been interested in anything having to do with ghosts, the paranormal, folklore, since I was young. And I grew up in a house that I believe was haunted and targeted me specifically. But I've always been very interested in the spooky, the paranormal, the unexplained. My favorite show growing up was Ghost Hunters, and I would watch it religiously. I was born and raised in South Texas, and the spooky stories and the folklore that comes out of that area alone is enough to have someone either be completely turned off to this or just want to completely dive in. Not only in South Texas, but mixed with my culture. It's so good. It's something that I would definitely love to deep dive into and explore a little more. By the way, all of this stuff that I just use is Peach and Lily skincare. So I started this channel many years ago, and over the years it's taken different lives, but I feel like I finally settled at something that I actually love doing and I'm interested in, and I kind of feel like it's just all come full circle of liking very odd and weird things and kind of coming back into that as an adult. I love it. Something strange that I would say about me is that every October, end of October, early November, I tend to start experiencing more paranormal things around me. I'm not sure why it happens. I know people will say the thinning of the veil and whatnot, but every single year I can expect to experience some sort of activity. By doing this, the ultimate goal for me would be to eventually do some sort of narration work. But for now, I just really like this. Mostly I'm nosy and I want to hear all of your ghost stories, but just I genuinely love this sort of stuff. I have a degree in sociology. Ultimate goal with that is to be able to work as some sort of caseworker for children, but I've kind of always known that I wanted to be some sort of social worker. I would consider myself a hobbyist, if you will. I will try every hobby at least once until I get bored. The one that I've been most successful at, I would say, is knitting. A lot of them I'll try out, and if I'm not good at them immediately, I absolutely quit. I don't want to do it anymore. This is MCO Beauty Flawless Glow. This is an e.l.f. concealer that I've had forever. You can't even tell. And this is the Pixie On The Glow Bronze. I do want to note that a lot of the times when I'm making videos, people will comment about orbs. I've really only caught one orb in a video that was, I'm like 99% certain was an orb. Other times, if I'm sitting here and you're seeing things flying around, it's most likely makeup powder or cat or dog hair. So the ghost stories on here really started last year when I decided to sit down and finally tell my experiences that I had growing up, something that I had always wanted to share, but I was just kind of like, I don't know, I was just kind of reluctant on sharing. My parents don't own the house anymore. So I finally decided to just kind of sit down and share my own experiences that I had while I was growing up, and it kind of just turned into this. This is just so fun to me. I love just sitting down and reading the stories that you guys send in. I love it. Again, I'm nosy. Eventually, I would also like to take this into more like folklore and deep diving into what could possibly be going on or what could have possibly happened in the stories that you guys send in. I've had a good amount of people who follow me say that I need to do a podcast or a YouTube channel, and I would love to do those things. I just don't know if I have the brain capacity to do long form content. This is very short and it's very fun and I have time for this. But I would eventually love to do it. And I think with that is when I would actually read a story, sit down, try to dissect it, and figure out what could possibly be happening in terms of paranormal or other sort of explanations, because that is something that I'm also very interested in. I love when I get a story and somebody mentions an area that they're from, because then I can go in and kind of find the history of the area. Why are these things happening? What could have happened? And things like that. So I think that if I do start some sort of long form content, that's the idea for me of what I would like to do. This is Satchu Cheek Stain. I also use the contour, but mostly during the winter because it's a little more gray. I do love to read, and I basically read almost every genre. It depends on what mood I'm in. Right now I'm reading A Song of Ice and Fire, which is the Game of Thrones series. I'm on book 4. I think book 4. I have them here. I read on a Kindle and physical copies. I think this is the 4th or 5th book. But favorite spooky book, I would say, is Stephen King's Misery. Out of all the Stephen Kings that I've read, that has been my favorite, and that's probably my number one when it comes to spooky books. This is Satchu's Brow and Freckle Pen. So yeah, that's just a little bit about me, about how this all came to be, and my ideas for the future. If you want to share any ghost stories, paranormal encounters, or scary stories, you can send them to the email in my bio.
When I was a child, I watched a man crawl out of an antique mirror in the middle of the night. Scary story time. Back in the 1960s, my family was given an antique bedroom set that had belonged to my deceased uncle. It was old but beautiful, made in the kind of furniture built to last for generations. There was something about it that felt different, almost like it carried a piece of the past. My younger brother and I shared the bedroom and slept in the same bed. One night, I woke up and saw a man standing in our room. I watched as he slowly walked out through the doorway. I was still half asleep and convinced myself it had only been a dream. I closed my eyes and went back to sleep. Later that night, I woke up again. This time, I saw the man return. I watched in disbelief as he moved towards the old mirror in the room. Then something happened that I still cannot explain to this day. The man climbed into the mirror and disappeared. I was terrified. I didn't know if I was awake or dreaming. I said nothing and stayed completely still, hoping it was over. The next night, I decided to stay awake. I needed to know if my mind was playing tricks on me. Then it happened again. The man appeared from the mirror. He slowly crawled out, stopped for a moment, and looked directly at us. He stood there silently watching us, before turning around and walking out of the room. Frozen with fear, I woke my brother. We stayed awake together, hiding under our blankets, watching and waiting. And sure enough, the man came back. We both saw him walk into the room and crawl through the mirror once again. That was the moment we completely broke down. We ran to our parents' room crying, terrified, and told them what we had seen. Our father didn't believe us. He laughed it off and sent us back to bed, saying we must have had a bad dream. But we were too scared to sleep in that room again, so we grabbed our blankets and pillows and made a bed for ourselves in the hallway. When our parents saw how frightened we were, they eventually switched bedrooms with us. A few days later, we woke up to the sound of a massive crash. We ran to see what had happened. Our father was standing there, pushing the old dresser and mirror down the back steps. Without saying a word, he went into the garage, came back with gasoline and an axe, and destroyed the entire bedroom set. Then he burned it. He never explained what he had seen, nor admitted anything, but we knew. Whatever it was, he had seen it too. Later, my mother asked us to describe the man. We told her everything we remembered, and she became quiet. Then she told us that the man we described looked exactly like my uncle, the very person who had owned the bedroom set before he died. To this day, I still don't know what I saw that night. Was it a dream, a memory, something connected to that old mirror? I may never know, but this experience will haunt me for the rest of my life. And that's the end of the story. So do you think this dresser set was actually haunted, or did OP and his brother somehow share the same dream and experience the same thing? Let me know.
I have another Brujeria story time. This one was originally told in Spanish. I'm going to go ahead and translate it to you guys in English. So there was this girl named Brenda who had recently met this guy named Marcos. They hit it off quickly after. The only issue with Marcos was that he had an obsessive ex that for whatever reason would not leave him alone. As time went on, Brenda and Marcos became more serious, and the ex eventually just stopped bothering them. Brenda just figured that the ex probably finally got the point and moved on with her life. The only thing was that Marcos had a cousin named Lucia who was best friends with the ex. Brenda didn't see anything wrong with this. She just figured whatever, his cousin can be friends with whoever she wants to be, and just didn't think much of it. As time went on, Marcos and Brenda got even more serious and ended up getting married. Not long after, Brenda gets pregnant. She's about 6 months along when Lucia, the cousin, comes over one day unexpectedly and gives Brenda this container full of dip. There was like this dip that Brenda really liked, and Brenda says that as the cousin was handing her this dip, like her mouth was literally watering because she wanted to eat this dip so badly. Less than a day, she went through the whole container and ate the whole dip, and there was not much to it. Like, she continued on with her pregnancy. Now, when the baby was born with a deformed head. Like, his head was abnormally large, and it was almost like his body was really small, but his head was huge. Doctors ran a ton of tests on the baby, couldn't find anything wrong with him. They eventually just told her to just take him home, that maybe he was swollen from the birth, and that eventually his head would go back to normal. Weeks and weeks continued, and Brenda noticed that anytime the baby would go to swallow milk, she would try to breastfeed him, and anytime the baby would go swallow the milk, the baby would struggle to swallow the milk, and that he would just cry, and he was barely getting any milk in him. She continued taking him back to the doctors. They still can't find anything wrong with him. At this point, the baby's losing a ton of weight, and Brenda's she's literally about to lose it. Now, Marcus's mom, Brenda's mother-in-law, comes over one day to check up on her grandson and tells Brenda that she's gonna go to a curandera to get her cards read because she doesn't like the fact that the doctors can't find anything wrong with the baby, so she's gonna go the spiritual route. Brenda never believed in any of that. She was a devout Catholic, but pretty much at that point felt like she had nothing to lose, so she went ahead and told the mother-in-law to go do that. After the mother-in-law went to the curandera told her that what was wrong with the baby was brujeria. Somebody had done brujeria and that the baby needed cleansing. Brenda still was really skeptical about the whole thing and pretty much told the mother-in-law that she wasn't going to go that route, that she was going to just continue to take the baby to the hospital and just hope for the best. That night ended up being one of the worst nights. The baby would not sleep at all. The baby ate absolutely nothing. He just screamed and cried the whole time because he was in so much pain of every time he would try to swallow his neck, just couldn't take it. That morning, desperate, Brenda took the baby to church. She went up to the church and she's crying in the front pew to God, begging him for help and pretty much telling him I don't know what's wrong with my baby. I don't know who to go for help. Can you please direct me in the right direction? I don't know what to do. She says out of nowhere there was this woman dressed in all white that just showed up. She said she just showed up, walked up to Brenda and pretty much told her, looked at the baby and said, your baby is sick, isn't he? Brenda goes, yes, my baby's extremely sick. The woman then goes to her, I can help you, but you need to follow me. Brenda, she's looking at this lady, I don't know who this lady is. She's a complete stranger, but she says that the woman gave her so much peace that she just followed. She followed the lady. They ended up going behind the church. Apparently behind the church there was a house. She goes back there. They open the door. When they walk in, there's a bunch of other women in there as well that are all dressed completely in white, just like the lady that Brenda initially ran into. They take the baby and they start to pray over the baby, and then they put their hands on the baby's head and the neck, and then the woman goes to Brenda and tells her, somebody did brujeria to you for your baby to never be born, but it didn't work. Instead, it went to his neck, so that any time that he tries to swallow or get any nutrients inside of him, it prevents him, so that eventually he will then pass away from this. She then goes and describes, she said it was two females. She describes the two females and tells her that this was given to her in food while she was pregnant. When the woman is describing the two females to Brenda, they fit exactly what the cousin Lucia looked like and then the ex. They went ahead and did a full cleansing of the baby, and she says as they were rubbing the baby's neck, 2 screws came out of his neck. Brenda says that had someone else told her the story, she wouldn't have believed them. The only reason she believes it is because she was there and she witnessed them taking out 2 screws from the baby's neck. After all of this took place, Brenda ended up taking the baby back to that house a few more times for them to continue cleansing him until eventually he was completely fully cured. Her baby is now 33 years old. He is a grown man and it is healthy. Brenda says that when she got back home, she told her mother-in-law, and she told, of course, her husband, Marcos, and the mother-in-law was livid and confronted the cousin, Lucia, and completely cut her out of the family. She was not welcomed to ever step foot anywhere near them ever again. As time went on, Brenda says that A lot of bad things ended up happening to Lucia, to the cousin and the ex, but she mainly knows about the cousin. The cousin had a lot of horrible things happen to her throughout the year. She believes it's due to like the brujeria that she did, that it went back to her. One of the bad things that ended up happening to Lucia was the loss of one of her own children. So she says this whole thing, when it went back for everybody.
Get ready with me while I tell you guys this ghost story. This story was sent into my email, and if you have any ghost stories, paranormal encounters, or scary stories that you want to share, you can send them to the email in my bio. I was 16 years old, and my brother and I shared a bedroom. The room wasn't very large, so I had converted the closet into my own little sleeping area. It wasn't much more than a narrow space with a mattress and a few shelves, but I liked having my own little corner. It gave me a sense of privacy, and it felt cozy and safe. At least, it had. I had several real plants hanging from hooks on the wall beside my bed. I loved taking care of them, and they made the tiny space feel alive instead of feeling like a closet. And when I went to bed that night, everything felt as it always had. I did my usual routine, looked around at my plants and decorations, noting how warm I felt, and I drifted off. At some point in the middle of the night, it's always the middle of the night, I suddenly opened my eyes. I'd woken up more suddenly than I was used to, so I was a bit startled, but looking around, the room looked exactly the way I remembered it, so I tried to calm down. That's when I realized I couldn't move. My entire body was frozen. I couldn't sit up, I couldn't lift my arms, I couldn't even turn my head. Only my eyes could move, and that's when my panic started to multiply. Something was wrong, and I knew it. As I shifted my eyes toward the far corner of my tiny room, I noticed someone standing there. Oh, absolutely not. Imagine you wake up out of nowhere, you're startled, your heart is racing, you don't know why, and then you realize, hey, I can't move. Already terrifying enough. The only thing that you really have control over is your eyes, and so you're kind of looking around, seeing what the heck is going on. And there's someone in the corner of your room. Oh my God. At first, it looked like a shadow, but the longer I stared, the clearer it became. It was a woman. She was so tall that her head nearly reached the ceiling. She wore a long dress that looked ancient. It was hanging loosely from her body, with shredded fabric dangling from the bottom. The dress stopped just above the floor, leaving a small gap where I should have been able to see feet. But instead, there was only darkness. She wasn't moving. She just stood there facing me, watching. I wanted to scream for my brother. I wanted to jump out of bed and run, but I couldn't move. And the harder I tried, the more trapped I felt. Then she took one slow step forward. Oh my God. She wasn't walking normally. She made jerk-like movements to almost hobble across my room in tiny, unnatural steps, getting closer inch by inch. Oh. Just picturing this in my head, absolutely terrifying. At this point, I couldn't breathe. I remember trying with every ounce of strength I had to make any sound at all. My mouth opened, but nothing would come out, not even a whisper. The figure kept getting closer still until she was standing beside my bed. I could feel her presence towering over me. Then, she slowly raised one arm. She stretched her hand toward the wall where my hanging plants were mounted. Her fingertips barely brushed the wooden shelf holding them, and the instant she touched it, I snapped awake. This time I could move. I sat straight up, releasing the scream I'd been trying to get out for what felt like forever. At that exact moment, every single hanging plant I had came crashing off the wall. Clay pots shattered across the floor. Soil exploded everywhere. One pot slammed directly into my bass guitar. Another fell so close to my face that I actually felt the air as it missed me. My cactus fell right beside my bed and missed landing on me by inches. I was shaking, staring at the mess scattered across the room. The hooks had to have come loose. Maybe the shelf finally gave out. It had to have just been a coincidence that everything fell apart the exact second I woke up. But the woman had reached out, and she had touched the wall, And that's when everything came crashing down. I've heard countless people explain sleep paralysis over the years. They say the figures aren't real. They say your brain creates them while you're between sleep and consciousness. And maybe that's true, and maybe that's exactly what happened. But I've slept in that room for years since that night, and I've never experienced sleep paralysis again. I've never seen that woman again either. And sometimes when I walk past the corner of the room, I still catch myself looking for the place where she was standing. Because if it was only a dream, then who knocked my plants off of the wall?
Of the countless videos of Dwendes sightings throughout Latin America. Let me know what you think. Do you think these seem genuine, or do you think they could be easily faked?
A series of spooky stories, except for the worst thing that you found on a partner's phone. Jessica here has all the good stuff. Sent a pic of his sausage to his mom for approval before sending the same pic to me. Who the fuck? Go to jail immediately. A video of some other chick fucking herself with a cucumber on the hood of my car in the parking lot of the pizza place that he worked at. On the hood of the car in a parking lot of a fucking pizza place. A highly detailed Excel spreadsheet of every argument that we'd ever had, color-coded by who was right. I was never right. That is actually some psychopath shit. Picture of him spreading his ass open to send it to other guys. Cheating on me through Call of Duty Mobile. Ugh. A recording of himself twerking, his very hairy butt pics, him finding gay hookups with old men on Reddit and TikTok, convos of the 3 other relationships that he was in, 1 male, 2 female, and messages between him and his sister. Oh my god. Oh my god. I didn't read that last part. Don't text me to an unsaved number 10 minutes before each time that we would hang out. He wrote our vows with ChatGPT and told literal AI to make it less emotional. He was messaging his ex, telling her to come over while sending dick pics and videos. Worst part was I was in the hospital all alone, getting prepped to have a kidney transplant the next morning. Go straight to hell. Straight. No detours. I was 5 months pregnant and found a message that said, "Congrats to you and Gemma on having a baby." My name isn't Gemma, but Gemma was also 6 months pregnant with him. A video of him driving my car and nutting on my hoodie to send to another girl. The other girl was me on secret Snap account because I was trying to catch him cheating. A second family with a ring, a dog, and a kid on the way. He was living with me, and we were having a baby. This is truly diabolical. What? How are these men so... I don't get it. I'll find my way back to you to another girl 1 week before our wedding. However, I only found this 3 years later as we were divorcing and he was off spending time catching up with her. So yes, he did in fact find his way back to her. A picture of him and his girl celebrating their 2-year anniversary, even though we had been together for 8 years. A video of him and his brother. There is far too much incestuous content in this comment section. Pictures of me and my family through our windows. Protective order? I found him messaging someone saying that he regretted proposing to me. I bought a flight home to my mom next day. 3 years into our relationship, I found a list of reasons in his notes about why he didn't like me. Can a therapist enter the chat? A video of his mother in the shower and him getting off for recording. I don't even feel comfortable reading that one. What the fuck? I was cleaning up my girlfriend's Gmail account, which she asked me to do. I found several full nude photos in her trash that she had sent to my brother. Turns out they had been sleeping together for a year. Oh, the betrayal. Found out that he was paying girls money to watch him stroke his tiny chicken. Not one, not two, multiple women. However, I'd ask him to buy me a cup of coffee, and he'd throw a fit. How embarrassing is it that you have to pay someone? Oh my god. He texted his coworker, "What do you want for Valentine's Day?" while I was pregnant with our child, and he hadn't even asked me what I wanted for Valentine's Day. And spoiler, I didn't get anything either. Not my current man. Thank God. Well, it wasn't on his phone, but on New Year's Eve when the ball dropped, he turned and kissed his mom on the lips. Bitch. These are truly horrifying, but the amount of comments that have family ties, it's too common, and I don't like it. I'm uncomfortable.
Do we want a part 2?
We need to talk about this creepy video. You guys have been sending me this video non-stop and it is so unexplainable that it's starting to sound like a glitch in the Matrix type video. This video was posted less than a week ago by a user named Mapleton Chapter. And this is a dash cam type video taken during the day when they're stopped at a red light. We can see the cars on the other side of the road starting to make a turn, but one of these cars does something completely unexplainable. The car literally disappears. I have watched this video so many times, I have slowed it down and I cannot figure out where that car went. There's people saying that maybe it did a U-turn and the truck in front of it was just blocking it, but that doesn't make any sense. Even if we lost sight of the car at one point, we would have to see it eventually. But we just don't, and it completely disappears, which has led people to believe that this is some kind of ghost car. And honestly, I agree with this theory because the car itself looks pretty old. It stands out from the rest of the cars that look more modern. This car looks like an old car that you would see in the 50s or the 60s. So while this video could be some kind of glitch in the Matrix, it could also be paranormal, or both. The car seems out of place to begin with and then it randomly disappears. And the one thing that we can probably all agree on is that there is no logical explanation for this. But if you have a logical explanation, please let me know in the comments. And let me know in general what you think of this video. Let's watch a creepy video taken in Nayarit, Mexico. This video was taken and uploaded by a user named Hola Peter back in September of 2021. The person recording the video talks about how they are currently in their great-grandparents' house and their family members went out to buy candles since the power just went out, leaving him and his sibling home alone. However, they keep hearing noises around the house and they start to theorize that it might be their great-grandparents who have recently passed away. So they go around the house recording and they're trying to talk to this spirit and trying to get it to make its presence known to them. And keep in mind, these kids think that it's their family members, so they're not too frightened until they capture this.
Somos tus nietos.
There seems to be a dark black mass peeking out from inside of this doorway. And of course, this terrifies the kids and they run back inside. And even though there's been no follow-up to this video, a lot of people think that this was clearly something demonic. Or at the very least, something that didn't have the best intentions and actually took advantage of the innocence of these two children when they thought it was their great-grandparent. I completely agree with that take, and I found this video to be very unsettling. As always, let me know what you think.
About a year ago, I went to live with my older brother and his wife. They have 2 kids, a boy and a girl. And while I was there, I helped out by watching them. Since there were only 3 bedrooms in the house, my other brother had the 3rd room, which meant my nephew and I ended up sharing. He was only 1 year old at the time. Because of that, I was often waking up in the middle of the night to make him a bottle. Sometimes he'd cry out for me, and other times I'd already be awake. I've always been into scary movies and spooky things, but nothing like this had ever happened to me before. My older brother Jose is in the army, so we were living on a military base at the time. The place we lived in was kind of like a house, but also like an apartment. It was 2 stories. One night, I was on my phone watching a movie when my nephew woke up. I heard him groaning, so I got up, went to his crib, grabbed his bottle, and headed downstairs to the kitchen to prepare it. To get there, I had to pass through the laundry room on the ground floor. My brother always left the laundry room light on, but that night, it was off. As I was making the bottle, I got this strange feeling, like someone was watching me. It felt like it was coming from the laundry room behind me. I had my back turned to it, and I hurried up because I was scared. I should have known then that this was only the beginning. A couple of days later, around 8 p.m., my brother Jose and his wife were watching the kids, and I decided to go to the park across the street. The park only had a basketball court and some swings. with houses around it and trees that led into a forest. It was dark, but I just wanted to sit on the swings and listen to some music. After a few minutes of swinging, I got that same strange feeling again, like someone was watching me. There was nobody else there. I kept telling myself I was imagining it, but out of the corner of my eye, I saw something running from one tree to another. I got really scared, but again, I tried to brush it off. Then the air around me suddenly got cold. I was wearing a hoodie, but my entire body felt freezing. A few minutes later, my brother called and told me to come home. When I got there, he was outside waiting for me, wearing a tank top and shorts. I asked him if he wasn't cold. He looked at me strangely and said, "No, it's actually pretty hot." Well, a few days later, I was home alone with my nephew and niece. I had just put my nephew to bed upstairs in his crib and went back downstairs to watch a movie. My niece, who was only about 4 or 5 months old, was with me. While I was watching the movie, I suddenly heard footsteps running across the second floor. That immediately scared me because I was alone and my nephew couldn't get out of his crib. I went upstairs to investigate. My nephew's room was directly across from my brother's bedroom. Before leaving earlier, my brother had locked his bedroom door because our cat would like to go in there. As I reached the top of the stairs and was about to walk into my nephew's room, I froze. My brother's bedroom door was open. The light was on, and I could hear a voice coming from inside. I froze. My brother's bedroom door was open. The light was on, and I could hear a voice coming from inside. I walked in and saw my nephew sitting on the bed, playing. So I picked him up, carried him out, locked my brother's door behind me, put him back in his crib, and headed downstairs. Only a few minutes later, I heard footsteps again. So I went back upstairs. When I reached the hallway, my brother's bedroom door was open, and so was the bathroom door. I walked into the bathroom and saw my nephew wrapped in my brother's blanket, sitting on the floor and playing. He looked up and started laughing, but not at me. His eyes were fixed on the shower curtain. I instantly got chills. I grabbed my nephew and started to take him downstairs, but before I could, I realized I needed to get his bottle from his room. As I was about to walk in, I noticed the rocking chair slowly moving back and forth, as if something had pushed it. I didn't go in. My cat couldn't have done it. She was downstairs, asleep on the couch. I went downstairs instead. My niece was in her play area, so I sat my nephew on the couch and picked her up. A few minutes later, I heard giggling. When I looked over, my nephew was staring at the wall, laughing. Then my niece started laughing too, also staring at the same spot. I was terrified. I grabbed my phone and called my brother's friend and his wife. Her name is Gabby, and she does cleansings. I asked them to come over and cleanse the house, and by the time they arrived, I was already freaking out. While Gabby was cleansing the house, my brother's wife came home. I told her what had happened, but she didn't seem to care. She went upstairs and kept getting in Gabby's personal space, asking questions while she was cleansing the area. A few minutes later, Gabby told me to call my brother and ask if I could take the kids and stay at her house for the night. She didn't want us staying there after everything that had happened. He agreed, but asked why. Gabby took the phone from me and walked away, explaining everything to him. I couldn't understand what she was saying, but I trusted her. Later that night, we were at Gabby's house. I barely slept, maybe 2 hours at most. The next morning, around 7 a.m., the kids were still asleep. Gabby asked how I slept, and I told her I was still terrified. I asked her why we couldn't go back home, especially since my sister-in-law was there. Gabby looked at me and said we weren't safe while she was still in that house. She explained that while she was cleansing my nephew's room, my sister-in-law walked in and told her to stop. When Gabby ignored her, my sister-in-law grabbed her arm. Gabby said it didn't feel like her, like something else was there, and told me she had never seen her act that way before. And when Gabby told her we were leaving, she became angry. As we drove away, Gabby told me she saw my sister-in-law standing in the window, smiling and slowly waving at us. That was a year ago. My brother is no longer with her and now has full custody of the kids due to other issues. I never told anyone what happened or what Gabby told me. I moved back in with my mom, but to this day, no matter where I go, I still feel like someone is watching me. My dad has probably the best scary story I have ever heard. He once told me about the first time he encountered La Llorona. When he was younger, my dad was the type of kid who wanted to play all day, even if it meant getting in trouble. My grandparents would ground him whenever he didn't listen. He was about 10 years old when this happened. One day, he was outside playing with his neighborhood friends in Michoacan, Mexico. They would spend hours in the street, just being kids. Before he went out that evening, my grandma warned him, "Don't stay up late playing, or else La Llorona will take you away." My dad left it off and promised he'd come home early. He was about 5-10 minutes away from home, playing and having fun, when it started getting late. His friends decided to head home because they knew they would get punished if they stayed out too long. But my dad didn't want the night to end, so he stayed behind and kept playing by himself. It was around 10 or 11 at night, almost midnight, when he finally decided to walk home. The streets were dark and quiet, but he wasn't scared. In fact, he felt proud of himself for staying out that late. As he approached his house, he noticed a woman standing near a nearby home. She was facing the wall with her head leaning against it. At first, he didn't think anything of it. As he passed her, he politely said, "Good night, ma'am." She didn't respond. He continued walking until he reached his front door. Just before opening it, he suddenly felt an eerie sensation, like someone was watching him. Slowly, he turned around. That's when he saw La Llorona. She had pale skin, black eyes, and a wide, dark mouth. She was perched on top of a tree, staring directly at him while letting out a horrifying scream. The moment he saw her, he fainted from fear. When he woke up, he was inside the house with my grandma. He told her everything that happened, but instead of sounding surprised, she simply told him that's what happened to children who didn't listen to their parents. My dad immediately apologized and promised he would never stay out late again. And when my grandpa found out what happened, he still punished him for staying out so late. I was 10 years old when my dad first told me this story. Now I'm almost 18, and it still gives me chills every time I think about it.
Might have known the story of real life boogeyman.
Imagine glancing out of your window to see a blood-stained woman just stood there with a decapitated head. Before we get into this case, I post a brand new episode on my podcast, The Born Investigation, every single week. It began as a totally normal day in July 2019. That was until locals in St. Clair, New South Wales entered a real-life horror film. Residents immediately rang the police, too scared to open their doors, thinking, what the hell is going on out there? And things got even more terrifying once police arrived. The woman stood and confessed under torchlight that she'd behaved like a butcher. She was Jessica Camillary, the 25-year-old daughter of a lovely couple from that area. These were Vince and Rita. Now, honestly, they'd been through hell with Jessica since she was little. She was always a really troubled kid. She struggled with various mental health issues, and these had gradually just got worse and worse and worse. She had bipolar, she struggled with paranoia, and it felt like no matter what her parents did, every time they tried to help her, it just made things worse. She was constantly being moved from school to school, she was having violent outbursts, she was making people feel really scared. And this really put a lot of strain on her parents' relationship, and they ended up getting a divorce. But bless, Rita was like, do you know what, I'm just going to dedicate my life to Jessica now, I need to get her better. She was an amazing mum like that, she really didn't want to give up. But like I said, things just kept getting worse and worse, and in 2018, Jessica was actually detained. She'd been waiting in just a normal doctor's waiting room, it was pretty chill, and there was just a random woman in there, and suddenly out of the blue she started attacking her. She then got held in a psychiatric facility, and it was kind of like, okay, finally, is somebody going to do something now? Are we going to get help for Jessica? You've guessed it, things got worse. While she was actually in that facility, you would think that she would be safe, you would think that she would be detained. But no, she attacked a nurse while she was in there. It felt like she was even worse being away from home, being away from like her comforts. So her mum was experiencing real mum guilt, like to the max. She was thinking, am I being a bad mum by keeping her locked away? She would end up making the most fatal mistake. She discharged her and took her home. So Rita was like, I'm going to look after her at home now. I'll make sure everything's perfect. We're going to get her better. And the pair of them usually had a pretty good relationship. They got on really well. Normally, they were quite sweet towards each other. But as you probably guessed, things got worse. Jessica started to become really fixated on this one guy. She just seemed to be like totally obsessed with him. She was ringing him constantly, and it escalated to sending him really threatening voicemails. She was totally harassing him, and the mum was like, oh God, I can kind of see where this is going. So I'm actually going to take some action. I'm going to take Jessica to the police station to try and almost like scare her off. It actually did work for a while. Jessica seemed more calm and the calls to this random guy stopped. But then on the 20th of July 2019, while she was just out on a walk with her mum, Jessica suddenly snapped. She had this really severe episode of paranoia where she was convinced that her mum was conspiring against her. She suddenly started screaming and shouting out of the blue, and the mum desperately tried to quickly dial for the doctor to come and do a home visit. But when he arrived at their house, Jessica chased him out the door. And Rita by now was thinking, oh my God, we actually probably need the big guns, like I need to call police. So she quickly dialed the emergency services. That's when Jessica grabbed a bunch of knives. She slashed her mum in the face and neck, eventually cutting through her neck, grabbing her head and dragging it out onto the pavement. And when police got there, they just couldn't believe what they were hearing from Jessica. It was like this whole situation was getting even more insane. Jessica asked police, is it possible to bring somebody back to life once you've cut their head off? The crime scene was so disturbing that the officers that responded that day had to go through intensive trauma therapy, and some never returned to work. In 2020, Jessica was found not guilty of murder, but convicted of manslaughter due to her complex mental health needs. She was eventually given 16 years in prison.
Have you ever had a dream that felt so real that when you woke up, it left you wondering if it actually happened? Apparently, there's a study going around where some scientists, even philosophers, are saying that when we dream, we're not just making up things in our heads. It's not just like a make-believe world that we have in our head. Apparently, when we dream, we are visiting different versions of ourselves in different realities. I find the whole thing to be so incredibly fascinating because I've had many vivid dreams where I have had children that I don't know. I have had husbands that I've never met. And I have experienced losses. I remember the one dream was so vivid where I had a baby. And I remember like this dream went on forever where I'm like, it's just like day to day life with the baby, me breastfeeding the baby, me taking care of the baby. And the baby ended up passing away. When I woke up, I was so heartbroken that I mourn the loss of that imaginary baby. Which apparently wasn't so imaginary. I mean, he exists in a different realm apparently, but like I mourned the loss of that baby for a long time. Have you ever had a dream that felt so incredibly real that you couldn't stop thinking about? Also, like dreams have meanings. There's a reason why we're seeing those specific clips of our times or our lives in different realities. I don't know. The whole thing is just fascinating to me.
So this story time is going to be a little bit different. It's really creepy, spooky, or anything of that sort. So as some of you may know, the Puerto Rican festival was in New York City in Manhattan last Saturday, and then the parade was on Sunday. I went to the city Saturday morning. I was supposed to stay till Sunday, but things happened, so I ended up leaving Saturday. Actually, I left Sunday morning, like 4 or 5 o'clock in the morning. So I'm out there on Saturday at the festival, and you know, I'm chilling and stuff. I'm walking, and I see that they had Coi Leray on stage. I'm like, oh my god, like, I didn't hear them announce that Coi Leray was gonna be on the stage. Nothing. I just was walking past. I seen her dancing on stage. I caught my little 1-2 videos, and then I kept it pushing. We had got stuck. Like, it was a full herd of people. Like, so many people in this one area that me and my family was walking in, that we got stuck in this area for like the remainder of Coi Leray's performance. It was getting to a point where people couldn't breathe. Babies was being not stomped on, but like it was just too much. I had to help somebody's random child get out of that herd while I'm over there short as hell, suffocating my damn self. By the time we get out of that little situation, Coi Leray's done performing. I turn and I look on the stage, and now they got Sean Paul performing on stage, so I get my little other videos for him too. So now I'm like right across from the stage, but like way further down, so I can't really see the stage, but I can at the same time. I'm sitting by this ice cream truck, and my dad and my sister got their speaker and the microphone, and my sister was singing Selena. We was all just like doing our own thing or whatever, and we was basically just chilling, having a good day. Why I turned my head to the right, and I see Coi Leray walking. Like, she literally was like walking. She didn't have no security around her. She didn't have a big group around her. I think she only had about 3 people with her. They didn't even look like, you know, famous people. They could be famous, but like they looked like regular people that she knew. I'm like, is she dead ass right now? Like, she's dead ass right next to me right now, just chilling. And so that's when I was like, okay, I gotta take my little videos with her, because I just know once everybody peeped that she's right there, they're gonna come rushing. As I'm walking up to her, she keeps looking at me and keeps smiling, and she is so bad. Like, she's so freaking pretty. Like, she's pretty on social media, but like seeing her in person, like, she's way prettier. So I'm going up to her. Like I said, she keeps looking at me and smiling, but now she's looking around, you know, because she sees me coming up to her, so she's looking around. And I start seeing other people coming up slowly but surely. I'm like, oh, can I take a video with you? And I start recording her to see like her reaction or whatever. She instantly said yes. Like, she wasn't rude. She was not stank, nothing. Like, she was like, yes, girl, we can take a video together. I'll show you guys the video. She ended up saying like, oh, this is crazy right before the video though. 'Cause she was saying like, it's crazy how everybody's starting to come up to her.
Can I take a picture with you? Yeah.
And yeah, so I got my little video with her. My parents and my sister and her boyfriend got little videos and pictures with her. So I'm gonna insert it. And then after that, my dad started playing one of her unreleased songs on his speaker. And it's funny because she actually posted the video of her dancing to the song. And you could see like my dad's arm part in the video. He basically started her with the music for her, you know, peoples to be like, okay, we're going to record and we're going to post this snippet. If you go on her page, you'll see that. I'm going to just rate meeting Coi Leray a 1,000 out of 10. Like, her vibe, her smile, her style, like everything about her is like a 10 out of 10. She's one of the celebrities that you could actually meet and have a good time with. And yeah, she actually lingered around a little longer. Like, she wasn't on some like, okay, I gotta go because everybody's coming. She was just chilling. She was enjoying her day at the Puerto Rican Fest. She was around me for like, I want to say a good like 20 minutes before she ended up walking off into the crowd. And of course, me and my family respected it. We wasn't gonna follow her the whole time. And yeah, that was pretty much it. And then I ended up going to my dad's friend's house, and my dad's friend's mom was there. So I'm talking to her because she looks at us like her grandchildren. She's basically telling me that she walked right past Sean Paul, and everybody was following, bringing out their cameras, just doing the most because it's Sean Paul, right? And the whole time she's telling me she don't even know who Sean Paul is. And I'm like, girl, you don't know who Sean Paul is. She literally was like arm to arm with him, just like walking by his side, not even realizing who he was. And she said this was after he performed. And yeah, that was just my little experience at the Puerto Rican Fest. I feel like being in New York City, you always gonna meet somebody. Always. You just gotta be there at the right time.